morning. Guten Tag, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, verehrte Delegierte, verehrte Gäste. Ich hoffe, die Eröffnungsveranstaltung des Kongresses gestern hat euch gefallen und dass ihr auch einen schönen Abend hattet. Wir haben heute viele Gäste bei uns und obwohl ich sie nicht alle namentlich nennen kann, will ich einige doch begrüßen hier und mich für deren Unterstützung bedanken, die insbesondere an den Subplänen arbeiten. Es gibt heute einen Gast, der keiner Vorstellung bedarf, weil er einer von uns war, denn jetzt ist er in einer anderen Position und einer anderen Rolle. Es ist Guy Ryder, unser früherer Generalsekretär und der jetzige Generaldirektor der Internationalen Arbeitsorganisation. Guy, herzlich willkommen. So, Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir müssten jetzt langsam zu den Kongressgeschäften kommen, damit wir ans Arbeiten kommen. Gestern haben wir ja genug gefeiert. Als erstes rufe ich auf den Bericht der Mandatsprüfungskommission. Die Mandatsprüfungskommission ist gestern vom IGB-Vorstand noch mal bestätigt worden. Das Wort hat Eva Nordmark von TCO Schweden. Eva? Wer ist sie? Und Eva Nordmark. Okay. Eva is not yet in the room. Okay. Okay, we have to change something. Eva had not yet the remarks. So, jetzt beginnen wir also mit Plamen Dimitrov. Er ist der Sprecher der Geschäftsführungskommission und Plamen sollte uns jetzt den ersten Bericht geben. Plamen, bist du im Saal? Okay, wunderbar, jetzt klappt es ja langsam.
So, vielen Dank, Herr Präsident Michael. Liebe Freunde, Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich heiße Plamen Dimitrov und möchte den ersten Bericht der Geschäftsführungskommission präsentieren. Und jetzt werde ich auf Englisch verfahren. This was all my German, so thank you. The full and detailed report of the committee is available on the Congress website, so we'll highlight the main recommendations to the Congress. Actually, yesterday evening it was uploaded to the website. The ITUC General Council appointed at its 12th meeting yesterday here in Berlin the following delegates as members of the Congress Standing Orders Committee. I will name it. Luc Quatterbeck, ITUC Deputy President, CSC Belgium. Nair Goulart, ITUC Deputy President, Força Sindical Brazil. Antonio Lisboa Amancio do Vale, CUT Brazil. Plamen Dimitrov, Situ Bulgaria. Babs Bayer, CLC Canada. Barbara Sesek, DGB Germany. Kofi Asamoah, GTUC Ghana. Owen Tudor, TUC Great Britain. Jyoti Makwan, Sewa India. Francis Atoli Kotu Kenya. Ellen Dekkers, FNV Netherlands. To Arne Solbakken, ELO Norway. Shahar Said, PGFTU Palestine. Miriam Bakonate, UDTS Senegal. And Cathy Fargold, FLCO USA. The Standing Order Committee held its first meeting yesterday, and the Congress is invited to ratify the composition of the Congress Standing Orders Committee as above. I was elected committee chairperson and rapporteur, and the agenda was adopted. So, colleagues, Dear brothers and sisters, bearing in mind the ITUC General Council's recommendations adopted at its 12th meeting, the committee recommends that Congress adopt the standing orders in their existing form, with the following procedures for a plenary debate on draft Congress statements building workers' power. On the morning of Wednesday, 21st of May. First, the Standing Orders Committee emphasizes that the debate on the draft Congress statements should be a genuine debate, and that delegates should ensure that their remarks are concise and specifically focus on speaking for or against a proposed amendments to the draft statement. I should tell you that all members of the Standing Orders Committee have committed to lead by example on this. Second, delegations wishing to propose an amendments to the draft statement should submit their amendments in writing in one of the 4 official Congress languages, English, French, German or Spanish, to the Congress Secretariat by 1500 on Monday, 19th of May. It means we have less than 6 hours. To enable them to transmit it to the Standing Orders Committee in preparation for the plenary debate. And the third, the Standing Orders Committee, meeting in the afternoon of Thursday, 22nd of May, ensure that any changes to the frameworks for action adopted in the 3 sub-plenaries are consistent with the final text of the main Congress statement, including any amendments to it adopted by the plenary. Regarding the holding of elections, as per the Constitution and in order to fulfill the constitutional requirements, that the vote shall be a secret vote, the Standing Orders Committee proposes to the Congress that the ballots be counted by a legally certified notary or its equivalent under the law of the host country, in this case Germany. In order to further ensure the integrity of the vote, it is proposed that the whole process, including the issuance and lodging of the ballot papers, be overseen by the chairs of the Congress credentials and the Standing Orders Committees, and that the chairs of those committees also observe the counting of the ballots in such a way as to maintain the secrecy of each vote. Regarding the Congress life, and in order to ensure the maximum number of interventions in a time available, the Standing Orders Committee recommends to Congress a time limit of 4 minutes be set for leaders' speeches. Draft Congress Program. Having considered the draft Congress Program approved by the 12th meeting of ITUC General Council, the committee recommends to Congress the adoption of the Congress Program with the following addition. That following the address by the ILO Director General later this morning, a panel discussion including 3 panelists with the expertise in economics and development and moderated by a journalist take place in the plenary. This panel, entitled Fault Lines in the Global Economy, the Failure of Austerity, would include short introductory remarks by the panelists, followed by the question and answer session involving Congress participants. The Standing Orders Committee also recommends to Congress the nomination of Moody Giro, Liz Schuler, and Karl-Peter Thorwaldsen to each chair one of sub-plenary sessions during the week. List of Congress documents. The committee reviewed the list of official Congress documents and approved their general distribution. 2 constitutional amendments were presented to the committee for further discussion. The Standing Orders Committee decided that any request for circulation of the documents other than official Congress documents should be dealt with at the discretion of the General Secretary, and authorized the General Secretary to set up a documentation desk for a display and distribution of such a documentation. I always see that in a plenary room we have almost 15 exhibition stands. So each organization has to be responsible for things that we can see there. The committee will be meeting again this afternoon, and on behalf of the committee, I move the adoption of this report, and thank you very much.
Danke, Plowman, für deinen Bericht. Ich frage, ob es Unklarheiten über den Bericht gibt. Ich sehe nichts. Dann komme ich zur Billigung des ersten Berichts der Geschäftsführungskommission. Der Bericht ist hiermit angenommen. So, dann gehen wir über jetzt zum Bericht der Mandatsprüfungskommission. Eva, du hast das Wort.
President, dear colleagues, this is the first report from the Credentials Committee, and I'm going to make it very short because it's a very short report. In accordance with our constitution, the 15th Executive Bureau held in Brussels on the 2nd to 3rd of April 2014 appointed on behalf of the General Council a Credentials Committee of 7 members subject to ratification by Congress as follows. Ruth Coelho Monteiro from FS Brazil, G. Sanjeeva Reddy from ITUC in India, Muhammad Hanif Pirum from MLC Mauritius, Natalia Klimova, FNPR in Russia, myself, Eva Nordmark, TCO in Sweden, Liz Schuler, AFL-CIO, United States, Leonard Hikumba from ZCTU in Zambia. The General Secretary appointed Nelson de Macedo as Secretary of the Committee and Petra Winkler as his assistant. The first meeting at the Credentials Committee was held yesterday, Sunday, the 18th of May, and was attended by G. Sanjeeva Reddy, Natalia Klimova, Eva Nordmark, Liz Schuler, and Leonard Hikumba. Uma Nagendramani and Thomas Jansson assisted as advisors. The committee elected me as a chairperson and rapporteur. And the second meeting we will hold today at 10 o'clock. The Congress is requested to ratify the membership of the Credentials Committee. Thank you.
Danke, Eva, für deinen Bericht. Gibt es Wortmeldungen dazu? Das ist nicht der Fall. Dann ist der Bericht hiermit angenommen. Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich bitte euch von den Plätzen zu erheben. Wir wollen der verstorbenen Kolleginnen und Kollegen gedenken, die mit uns in besonderer Beziehung stehen. Die Namen der Kolleginnen und Kollegen, denen wir besonders gedenken wollen, wird oben eingeblendet. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir gedenken der Verstorbenen in Dankbarkeit. Wir werden ihnen ein ehrendes Andenken bewahren und sie in unserer Erinnerung behalten. Ich bedanke mich dafür, dass ihr unsere Toten geehrt habt. Herzlichen Dank. So, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir beginnen jetzt mit dem, was man gemeinhin Aussprache nennt. Als erstes gebe ich das Wort Rainer Hoffmann. Rainer Hoffmann ist seit einer Woche Vorsitzender des Deutschen Gewerkschaftsbundes, sozusagen der gastgebenden Organisation. Rainer, du hast das Wort.
Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, verehrte Gäste, ein ganz herzliches Willkommen zum 3. Weltkongress des Internationalen Gewerkschaftsbundes hier in Berlin. Den Präsidenten des Internationalen Gewerkschaftsbundes, Michael Sommer, muss ich nicht besonders willkommen heißen. Er wohnt hier in Berlin und hat 12 Jahre lang erfolgreich den Deutschen Gewerkschaftsbund geführt. Und, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich empfinde es als eine große Ehre, seit einer Woche sein Nachfolger zu sein. Aber, lieber Michael, bis Mittwoch dieser Woche bist du noch im Amt des Präsidenten des Internationalen Gewerkschaftsbundes und solange wohl auch noch Chef, auch meiner, macht Gebrauch davon, aber nicht ganz so viel. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, dieses Kongresszentrum, genannt CityCube, ist, das habt ihr gemerkt, brandneu und an vielen Stellen noch gar nicht vollendet. Wir haben es letzte Woche für euch getestet und nun findet hier der erste Kongress des Internationalen Gewerkschaftsbundes in Deutschland statt. Danach wird es wahrscheinlich bis zur Fertigstellung wieder geschlossen und es bleibt für uns die schönste Garage Berlins. Berlin hat einige spezielle bauliche Besonderheiten, wie beispielsweise eine Waschmaschine. Darin verbirgt sich das Bundeskanzleramt oder eine schwangere Auster. Dahinter verbirgt sich das Haus der Kulturen und seit ein paar Tagen halt auch eine schöne Garage, in der wir in dieser Woche arbeiten werden. Liebe Sharon, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, auch in der Geschichte der internationalen Gewerkschaftsbewegung nahm Berlin einen besonderen Platz ein, nachdem sich 1901 in Kopenhagen eine Reihe nationaler Gewerkschaftsbünde auf eine Koordinierung und Zusammenarbeit geeinigt hatten, wurde 1903 in Dublin die Begründung eines internationalen Gewerkschaftssekretariats beschlossen, das dann ab 1904 seinen Sitz in Berlin hatte und das der damalige Vorsitzende des Allgemeinen Deutschen Gewerkschaftsbundes, Karl Legien, leitete. Und nun, 110 Jahre danach, ist es für den Deutschen Gewerkschaftsbund eine große Genugtuung, hier in Berlin Vertreter von 325 Mitgliedsorganisationen aus 161 Ländern des Internationalen Gewerkschaftsbundes begrüßen zu dürfen. Wir werden alles tun, um euch ein guter Gastgeber zu sein, Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Es macht durchaus Sinn, die Eröffnung zum Anlass zu nehmen, einen Blick zurückzuwerfen. Aber Noch besser ist es, wenn wir die Zukunft ins Visier nehmen. Der Zusammenschluss vom Internationalen Bund freier Gewerkschaften und dem Weltverband der Arbeit, der auf dem Gründungskongress in Wien besiegelt wurde, ist ein Meilenstein auf dem Weg zur internationalen Gewerkschaftseinheit. An diesem gemeinsamen Haus muss weiter gebaut werden. Es ist längst nicht mehr im Rohbau. Ich kenne mich da ein wenig aus. Mein Vater war Maurer, aber Feinarbeiten im Innenausbau sind durchaus noch sinnvoll. An diesen Arbeiten wird sich auch der Deutsche Gewerkschaftsbund nach Kräften in den nächsten Monaten beteiligen. Jede internationale Gewerkschaftsorganisation braucht ein starkes Fundament, und das sind ihre Mitgliedsorganisationen. Koordination und Leitung sind unverzichtbar. Sie brauchen als Ergänzung regional und sektorale Dynamik. Eigentümer des internationalen Hauses, der demokratischen Gewerkschaftsbewegung sind seine Bewohner. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, das Leitbild des Internationalen Gewerkschaftsbundes findet sich in der Präambel der Verfassung der Internationalen Arbeitsorganisation aus dem Jahre 1919. Zitat Anfang: Der Weltfriede kann auf Dauer nur auf sozialer Gerechtigkeit aufgebaut werden. Zitat Ende. Und das, so die Verfassungsgeber der Internationalen Arbeitsorganisation, schließt ein Vereinigungsfreiheit, faire Löhne, Vorsorge im Alter, sozialer Schutz, gute Arbeitsbedingungen und Kampf um mehr Beschäftigung. Das war im Jahr 1919 und das, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ist auch heute noch gültig. Das steht nach wie vor auf der Tagesordnung der Internationalen Arbeitsorganisation und das bleibt auch auf unserer Agenda überall in der Welt, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Bei dieser Gelegenheit ist es mir eine besondere Freude, den Generaldirektor der Internationalen Arbeitsorganisation, Guy Ryder, ganz herzlich begrüßen zu dürfen. Lieber Guy, wir sind stolz darauf, dass es zum ersten Mal in der langen Geschichte der Internationalen Arbeitsorganisation gelungen ist, dass einer von uns an der Spitze der ILO steht. Das freut uns sehr. Ein herzliches Willkommen hier in Berlin, lieber Guy. Wir Europäer müssen uns verstärkt im Kampf für gewerkschaftliche Freiheiten und die Durchsetzung von Arbeitnehmerrechten engagieren. Wir müssen begreifen, dass die Probleme in anderen Regionen der Welt auch unsere Probleme sind. Ich habe nicht so viel Zeit, um das ausführlich zu erläutern. Deshalb gestattet mir nur zwei konkrete Beispiele. Nicht weit von hier, in der Berliner Innenstadt, kann jeder von uns, kann jeder deutsche Konsument ein T-Shirt für ganze 1,50 € kaufen, also fast zum Nulltarif. Produziert wird diese Ware in Bangladesch. Luftlinie Berlin-Dakar 1080 Kilometer. Monatseinkommen der Textilarbeiterinnen $40. Stundenlohn. Stundenlohn 60 Cent. Wir müssen begreifen, das, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ist nicht weit weg. Das ist unmittelbar vor unserer Haustüre. Was wir tun können und was wir tun müssen, ist zweierlei. Über die öffentliche Meinung einerseits Druck auf die Konzerne und Warenhausketten machen, damit sie es nicht bei feierlichen Erklärungen belassen, sondern diesen Druck auch auf die Textilfabrikanten in Bangladesch und anderswo auf dem Globus weitergeben. Und genauso wichtig, wir müssen die Gewerkschaften in Bangladesch und anderswo konkret und materiell unterstützen. Am Ende können nur die Gewerkschaften in diesen Ländern die Verhältnisse zum Besseren wenden. Sie brauchen uns und wir brauchen Sie, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Und noch ein zweites Beispiel. In der letzten Woche ist ja fast ein Wunder geschehen. Der Präsident der FIFA, Sepp Blatter, hat gesagt, die Vergabe der Fußball-Weltmeisterschaft nach Katar sei ein Fehler gewesen. Es hat lange gebraucht, um zu dieser Einsicht zu gelangen. Aber vielleicht war es ja auch gar kein Fehler. Denn zu fragen ist, wäre sonst die systematische Ausbeutung und menschenfeindliche Behandlung der Wanderarbeitnehmer in Katar auf die internationale Tagesordnung gerückt. Wäre sonst das Regime in Katar nicht so unter Druck geraten, dass sich nun langsam die Verhältnisse, wenn auch nach wie vor unzureichend, verbessern. Der Internationale Gewerkschaftsbund hat mit seiner weltweiten Kampagne entscheidend zu diesen Veränderungen beigetragen. Dazu mein ganz herzlicher Glückwunsch, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Lasst mich auf einen aus aktuellem Anlass noch einen Hinweis geben. Der tunesische Gewerkschaftsbund URETT ist von einer ganzen Reihe von Hochschulen, Universitäten für den Friedensnobelpreis vorgeschlagen worden. Dieser Vorschlag findet offensichtlich zunehmende Unterstützung. Und das hat, wie ich finde, gute Gründe. Ohne die URETT wäre der Übergang des Landes zu demokratischen Verhältnissen nicht gelungen. Ohne die URETT, ich wiederhole mich, wäre der Übergang des Landes zu demokratischen Verhältnissen nicht gelungen und es wäre auch nicht weitgehend so friedlich verlaufen. Die URETT war und ist der Anker, an dem das neue Tunesien festmacht. Das Schlimmste hat das Land hinter sich, aber das Schwierigste liegt noch vor ihm. Ich begrüße die tunesische Delegation ganz herzlich und ich kann euch sagen, ihr könnt stolz auf das sein, was ihr geschafft habt und wir sind stolz auf euch. Liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, die Antwort auf die Herausforderung der Globalisierung verlangt eine verstärkte Globalisierung der gewerkschaftlichen Zusammenarbeit. Dies ist keineswegs eine neue Erkenntnis. Wir haben keinen Grund zur Selbstzufriedenheit. An unserem Weg gibt es nun mal kein Ende. Wir müssen weiterkämpfen, wir müssen weitergehen und manchmal wohl auch ein wenig schneller. Zwischen uns, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, zwischen uns darf es keine Grenzen geben. Wir haben eine große Vielfalt in unseren Reihen und das ist gut so. Vielfalt ist nicht der Feind von Geschlossenheit. In der Vielfalt liegt unsere Stärke und unsere Kraft, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Lasst uns gemeinsam an die Arbeit gehen, stärken wir unsere Solidarität, bauen wir weiter an unserem gemeinsamen Haus, dem Internationalen Gewerkschaftsbund und fühlt euch hier in Berlin bei uns zu Hause. Let's build Workers' Power worldwide. Herzlichen Dank. Glück auf.
Herzlichen Dank, Rainer, für deine Begrüßung hier der Delegierten. Wir kommen nun zum nächsten Tagesordnungspunkt, nämlich zum Bericht der Generalsekretärin. Sharon, du hast das Wort.
Union men and women, Michael, Guy, friends, welcome to the 3rd International Congress of the ITUC. We are the largest global democratic force on earth. With nearly 180 million members, we stand as representatives of working people all over the world. We share a commitment to a set of values enshrined in our Constitution: peace, democracy, rights, the dignity of work and social justice. We fight together for workers' rights everywhere. We abhor the attacks by too many governments on fundamental rights and the wages and the social protection of their people. Governments who are cowed by the big business and the big finance gurus. We are the voice of opposition, and we are the voice of progress. Corporate power stands for the profits of the 1%. Their tools are inequality, precarious work, and supply chain exploitation. We are the opposition who stand on the front lines to defend democracy and justice, to defend rights, and we are the movement that will fight every time for justice. We know who we stand with. We stand with the world's 2.9 billion working people. 60% of the working people of the world are employed in the formal sector, where workers are increasingly facing precarious employment arrangements. And 40% are in the informal sector, the sector of desperation, and there are no rights. No minimum wages, no social protection. They're ours too. Christina, our sister from Spain, says it all. There is a feeling of hopelessness. People are afraid. If you can't bargain, you can't get a decent wage. Well, we want full employment and decent work for everybody. That's simply non-negotiable. We'll organise for just that. For jobs, for collective bargaining, for minimum wages on which you can live, and for universal social protection. And we know that working people, we know that the world's people respect the role of unions. The ITUC global poll found that 63% of people think workplaces with unions have better wages, conditions and safety. We know people have lost trust in their governments. There is not a single country where a majority believes that the economic system is fair to working people. We know what the world's people want, even if our governments don't. 87% and more favour their government providing workers with unemployment benefits, decent retirement incomes, maternity protection, affordable access to health, education and, of course, pensions. Organising. Organising is our strength. Organising in the informal sector, organising migrant and domestic workers, women and young workers. With the Global Unions Federations, we are building campaigns against exploitative companies, and we are organising against slavery, beginning with Qatar. Brothers and sisters, we've come through 4 years of turmoil. When we met in Vancouver, we actually were optimistic. But the Great Recession, born in America from the greed of big finance, it's now a bitter crisis of unemployment. We were optimistic in Vancouver. We were optimistic of recovery. But in their desperation to appease the bond markets and the ratings agencies and the Troika, with the IMF, the European Commission and the Central Bank, governments went to war on their own people, slashing collective bargaining rights, minimum wages, social protection, government services and jobs. they embraced austerity. It failed, we said it would fail, and it did fail. Georgia, a young woman from Greece, understood all too well. She said to me, "The IMF have ruined my life. I will never forgive what they did to me, to my mother. My mother's pension was slashed, she can't live, and I can't help her." We know the global wage slump continues. We know that Romania and Portugal are just two examples where the IMF demanded the government smash collective bargaining by more than 2/3. Yet the IMF's own research is flawed. The IMF admitted they underestimated the negative impact of their measures, but we've seen no recognition that these policies, based on flawed data, will be changed. Inequality is growing, with the majority of the world's poor now in middle-income countries. And while inequality is finally being recognised as a macroeconomic issue, the very tools of distribution, collective bargaining, minimum wages and social protection, our tools, remain on the structural reform hit list of the international institutions, of big business and the governments they command. We're very proud of our Frontlines publication. They show the devastation of the crisis on the lives of working people. They show empirical evidence that demonstrates that collective bargaining works and that minimum living wages and social protection are fundamental for reducing poverty and inequality. Trend data from our global poll over 3 years shows that the world's population for each of those 3 years, more than half of them have not been able to save a euro, a dollar, a unit of currency. For 82% of the world's people, their wages are stagnating or not keeping pace with living costs. With just over 3% global growth, there is no way that we will see relief in the bitter crisis of unemployment. The G20 will fail again if they don't invest in jobs in infrastructure, in the green economy and in the care sector, in health, education, childcare, aged care and other vital services. Investment in jobs, wages and universal social protection, not just in developed countries, but in all countries. There is no other recipe for economic and social stability. And we demand an economic agenda for women. The progress for women has stalled. The employment of women is the fastest way to drive growth and productivity. If women were in the workforce in equal numbers to men, we would see GDP increase remarkably. 4% in France, 8% in Japan, 34% in Egypt. And the jobs needed in the care economy to support women's participation add simply more jobs to the mix. So count us in. This is the ITUC campaign. Count us in marks our determination to support women's rights and equality. How many of you have already signed up to the Count Us In campaign? Let me see your hands. Come on, be proud of it. And by the end of the week, let's hope all of you have signed up. The message, my brothers and sisters, from women is clear. Count us into the workforce, count us into unions, and count us into leadership. ITUC is a working woman from Indonesia, and she says it very clearly. Our money, our wages are not enough to survive. Companies should respect women workers and pay a living wage. We are helping them make their profits. So our advocacy for full employment demands that the post-2015 UN Sustainability Development Goals must include employment and decent work, along with universal social protection floors as standalone goals. Please demand of your governments that they do not settle for less. Let's challenge them, publicise their commitments and get those goals up. We also support a goal for gender equality and for free universal quality education, along with the commitments necessary for affordable healthcare, sanitation, food, water and energy security. Well, brothers and sisters, Rainer already said it, and thank you for that great welcome, Rainer. But we can only express pride and solidarity in the liberation struggles in the Arab world. The ongoing struggle for peace, for democracy and rights has our full support, and we stand in awe of the courage of our colleagues. The images of people taking to the streets against dictatorships beginning in Tunisia rocked the world. The role of the UGTT is now dedicated to securing their constitution, a constitution that enshrines rights, a constitution that stands tall amongst all others and inspires every one of us. It is fitting, Brother Abbasi, that for this, the UGTT has been nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, and you have our unanimous support. Let's show him. But we also support a new ITUC Arab sub-regional structure. You will vote on this week. A structure that will give collective voice to unions fighting against state oppression of workers and for independent trade unionism, our banner. A structure that will work with both Africa and Asia. Michael Summer and other leaders have visited Palestine with me and witnessed firsthand the suffering of that land. The photo of these boys returning to their bombed-out school on the visit we made to Gaza with the colleagues from the PGFTU and the region demonstrates the senseless cruelty. The occupation of Palestine and the settlements in the West Bank must end. Palestine must be recognised as an independent state in line with our two-state policy. We will not give up. I promise you, Brother Shahir, we will not give up. But we are also witnessing the breakdown in democracy and rights in countries like Turkey, Bangladesh, South Sudan, Korea, many more, the escalation of the Central African Confederation and, of course, the Ukraine and more. But let me acknowledge the atrocity of the deaths in Turkey. For those miners, for their families, we feel justifiably angry. We feel angry at the lack of regulation, at the lack of protection. But we feel angry at the arrogance of the Turkish Prime Minister and of the use of water cannons against our grieving brothers and sisters. Indeed, we feel angry that our brother Kani Beko is indeed, the president of DISC, is indeed in hospital as a result. This is shameful, and as a tribute, I raise the helmet of one of the miners in Soma. It is 100 years since World War I. Michael Summer reminded the DGB Congress, never again war, never again fascism. Peace and democracy must always remain a focus for the ITUC. And I must say, I have to commend our brother Koga and Rengo. They never let us forget. They always drive this agenda with many of the rest of you, but I pay tribute to them today. There is also persistent state oppression against strikes and political protest in many nations. It is unspeakable, an unspeakable crime that in countries like Guatemala, Colombia and the Philippines, they still shoot trade unionists with impunity. We will continue to work with all of you to see that impunity is eradicated and murderers are prosecuted. Then we see countries like Cambodia, where the employers' attack on the right to strike in the ILO through the Committee on Application of Standards, has been taken to the front lines in the struggle for a minimum wage, where striking workers are shot and jailed, and where police and military action are sanctioned by governments and supported by local employers. We have seen similar oppression in Indonesia, Bangladesh, Haiti, many other countries. We cannot and we will not stand silent while workers are impoverished through the supply chains of big business and attacked by their own governments. I hope we will have your support to take on this abusive corporate power and fight for minimum wage fixing mechanisms in their countries. When a pair of jeans, as Rainer said, when a pair of jeans, the retailer receives 64% of the price and production workers 2%, this is pure greed. Our own ITUC poll tells us 94% of people want to strengthen international rules to make companies around the world provide better wages and living conditions. They're pretty good odds for us to organise around. A minimum living wage and social protection floors are the foundations of dignity and decent work. Germany is about to see a minimum wage realised, and we congratulate them. But we commiserate with the Swiss people who were too frightened to vote for one just this week. Together, we can and we must win this fight everywhere. We also have to continue the fight with the World Bank and its Doing Business report. The index is nothing short of a big business scam to get countries to impose neoliberalism on themselves. Doing business is best, they say, where employment protections and rights are weak. Doing business in this context is a crime against humanity. Yet the World Bank, the IMF, even sections of the UN defend and promote it. We thought we fatally wounded the Employing Workers Index, where freedom of association and collective bargaining are a tick against a country. But they want to bring it back, and we aim to fight fire with fire. The ITUC has the most comprehensive database of both the lack of legal rights and rights violations in our survey. Today, I launch a new index. The index is the ITUC Global Rights Index, the worst places in the world for workers. These global hotspots where workers' rights are absent or not respected, it's based on exhaustive methodology. There is a new global leaderboard now in the race to protect workers' rights. Where not to work is the counterpoint to the advocacy of big business to destroy the rights of workers. It is also a backbone for the global solidarity that our Countries at Risk program represents. But employers have stepped up their anti-union attacks. The drive to export the American corporate model is global. The attacks on the European social model are deliberate, well-planned and well-resourced. Like the IMF, the American Chamber of Commerce issues their policy prescriptions everywhere, and they use the threat of capital flight on governments. From opposition to the minimum wage in Moldova, to the opposition of collective bargaining in Romania, or a demand for systematic reduction of wages in Belgium. Even in Qatar, they issued a statement saying that workplace deaths and injuries would not happen if workers took more responsibility. On May Day this year, we decided to name and shame some of the worst of this club of employers. Put your hands up if you've voted for the worst boss in the world yet. Yes, look at those hands. Come on. If you haven't, go onto the website and vote, because we'll tell you who's going to win on Wednesday. You can see the CEO of Qatari Airlines has not shared his photo with us. Indeed, we know him as Mr. X. He threatened to sue the ITUC for exposing his attacks on unions and his defence of slavery. But he can't sue all of you. So get your vote in. It's a tough choice amongst this rogues gallery, but time's running out. I must say, though, seriously, their bullying knows no bounds. Take a look at what happened in the basement of a New York call centre.
Can I see you in the basement?
So, you want to form a union?
You know, you don't really need one. A union. They're for laborers. Painters, carpenters. You know. People who work hard.
I mean, we have a great HR department where we'll fix things.
Why don't you give me some time to make the changes you want? I can make things happier.
Why would you give your rights to the union when you can negotiate with us?
If you join the union, we won't be able to do one-on-ones like this. We don't need a union to come between us.
Make sure to make the right decision and vote no to the union.
Yeah. Make sure.
We do expect better. The law expects better. This is a German company, Deutsche Telekom's T-Mobile, a German company that bargains here with Verdi but uses fear and intimidation to keep their workplaces union-free in the US and other places. Verdi and the Communication Workers of America have a global union called T-Union. It's unique. The Verdi solidarity for American workers and their members is extraordinary. Verdi, CWA, German and American delegates, stand up. This is an amazing moment where we celebrate global solidarity on a campaign you will win. We have a message for Deutsche Telekom. We do expect better, and we don't give up. Colleagues, the threat to jobs and livelihoods includes the threat of climate change. For unions, it is simple. There are no jobs on a dead planet. Despite our success in being recognised as a key player by negotiators, despite our success in having a just transition guaranteed in the draft global agreement, and despite the adoption of the first ever conclusions guide on the world of work and environment in the ILO, which provides a tripartite agreement on just transition, governments have failed us. We watch governments fail the planet and their people in Copenhagen, and the same corporate interests want to see failure in Paris. Well, we must mobilise to Paris. We must mobilise for a global agreement, and we must demand industrial transformation with the funding for a just transition for vulnerable nations and for communities. And there are jobs, jobs and jobs. We did the research. 48 million new jobs in just 12 countries if they invest in green economy measures. You only have to look here in Germany to see the possibility. 400,000 new jobs in renewable energy in just 2.5 years. We are launching a global climate justice sign-up right here at this Congress, and I hope that you'll all be part of that. 6 o'clock tonight, tomorrow night, you'll see some of our leaders take the first step and sign up for mobilisation, for industrial transformation, for us determining the future. But sadly, brothers and sisters, Dorje Khatri, a great climate warrior, has died in a tragic accident on Mount Everest. Dorje was a leader of his Sherpas Union and vice president of GFON. He was alarmed at the impact of climate change on his beloved mountain, and he placed the ITUC flag on the top of Mount Everest to mark his pride in our fight for the climate. He gave me his medal for this climb, and today I dedicate it as a perpetual trophy for the Dorje Khatri Award for Union Action for Climate Justice. We will announce the winner at the Global Congress. So, brothers and sisters, despite the challenges, we are fighting back and we have victories to celebrate. Throughout the week, you will discuss many union successes, even as you determine the next set of priorities. And here's just a taste. Firstly, Burma, Myanmar. Our brother Mong Mong and his colleagues are back in Burma, organising workers after a 24-year struggle in exile. Then domestic workers, a new convention, 125 affiliates campaigning, 15 ratifications, plus the EU support, plus 12 unions, 60,000 new members, 11 new laws, 3 collective agreements, and the jobs of 12 million domestic workers formalised. Unions organising social protection in countries like the Dominican Republic. Magnificent. A collective bargaining agreement in an EPZ in Togo where they said there were no rights. Thousands of members in the nurses and transport unions in Swaziland, despite the oppressive regime of the monarchy. 1 million street vendors in India unionised, the informal sector workers taking their place in the executive in Ghana, mechanics operating legally with union support, so proud of their union in Mali. ITUC mapping of waste pickers and energy workers to support organising campaigns and much more, with standard setting for informal sector workers on the agenda of the ILO this year. A victory in the Inter-Americas Court on human rights on violations of freedom of association in Chile, and the new president, Michelle Bachelet, has already announced plans to prohibit the use of replacement workers during strikes. ITF and Uni taking on DHL, winning in Turkey against the company's yellow union strategy and using the OECD guidelines to secure social dialogue with DHL at the global level. Industrial and Uni securing the accord in Bangladesh and supply chains on the agenda at the ILO for 2016. Play-Doh, the development platform for the Americas, tax justice, an FTT in Europe, and the G20 to stop base erosion and profit-shifting behaviour of the corporations. Pay tax where it is earned. The G20 endorsement of long-term investment principles. The committees, our committee, Workers' Capitals Committee, working to get our pension investments out of the speculative economy and into the real economy where there are jobs. These are just a snapshot of victories that you will talk about all week. We are very proud of this union movement, and let me finish with the courage of the leaders in the Americas to support Auto Reformer, an internal program designed to reduce fragmentation and promote union unity. There is much more. Give yourselves a big hand. And then there is Qatar. Thank you, all of you, for your support in campaigning to end slavery. Qatar, the richest nation on earth, is a slave state. When a desperate worker leaves an Asian or an African nation, they've already been forced to pay illegal fees they can't afford. They arrive in Qatar more often than not to find their contracts torn up, and they are in a different job with far less money. They are forced to live in squalor with poor food, work 8, 10, 12 hours a day, 6, sometimes 7 days a week in extreme heat. When they are desperate to leave, they find themselves trapped in Qatar. Workers owned and at the mercy of another human being. It's 21st century slavery, the kafala system, with no rights. More than 4,000 workers conservatively could die before a ball is kicked in the World 2022 Cup. With the BWI and many of you, we say to FIFA, no World Cup in Qatar without workers' rights. And I thank Michael Summer for his work with FIFA because he has split their executive. Well, brothers and sisters, the Vienna Congress, it marked the birth of the ITUC and a determination to build a new internationalism. The Vancouver Congress saw a stronger global union movement, map out a broad and comprehensive policy priority, a set of priorities that we will reaffirm this week. And we've worked to develop a strategic planning framework to manage your demands, framed by the objectives you will discuss and debate this week. The ambitions you all hold for union growth, for sustainable jobs, secure incomes and social protection, for realising rights. We have reformed the ITUC financial system to reflect our work to make financial expenditure transparent. 2010 was a Congress year, and we put decisions into ambitious plans with a sound financial outcome. In 2011, we made the planning progress transparent and engaged affiliates in a more inclusive approach because we published all those plans for you to contribute to. In 2012, we invested in expanding our voice. We created Equal Times. We created the ITUC Global Organising Academy to build our capacity. We developed the Digital Action section. We redesigned the Countries at Risk strategy, and we took on slavery with our Qatar campaign. In 2013, we've been able to integrate these initiatives, and we've invested the surplus into an earmarked organising fund to start securing the future. I also take this opportunity to thank all the union donors sincerely. Your contribution to the Solidarity Fund, to the Countries at Risk and much more is true solidarity that lets the work get done. And now Berlin. You called for a new interactive Congress structure. We have a Congress designed to look at the issues as a basis for action, for organising and union growth, for the research and advocacy that facilitates strategic organising around the issues that will make a difference to the lives of working people, their jobs, their incomes, their social protection, and of course their rights. All our minutes, plans, activities and financial reports you will find on the website. So in conclusion, the system is simply stacked against workers. 2/3 of people think that government should do more to tame corporate power. We can be proud of being the largest global movement on the planet, but we must do more. We are only 7% organised. And while with collective bargaining we secure wages and conditions for 9% of workers, we can do better. We must invest in union growth if we are to seriously take on the challenge to build workers' power. With affiliates and GUFs, we are committed to this challenge in both the formal and the informal sectors of the economy. Through the ITUC Global Academy, we are training lead organisers in every region. Our regional secretaries have posted reports. They will lead the Congress live discussions with an overview of their successes and challenges. Let me thank the regional secretaries for their stewardship. And of course, none of this is possible without a team. So can I record my gratitude to the President, an amazing President, Michael Summer, and the Deputy Presidents, the Deputy Secretaries and our dedicated staff. They are the best. So can we do it? Can we build workers' power, increase our collective bargaining strength and grow the movement with another 20 million members by the time we come back, not here, but somewhere in 2018? Can we organise more than 20 million members additional? Come on, let me hear it. Can we? Is this an ambition we can deliver? Yes. Yes, we can. Workers' power, the power of collective voice, the power of the collective vote. we can take back our democracies, our workplaces and our rights. People want a more activist approach from their governments and have called for international action. Well, we have political power too. If we mobilise it, 42% of the world's people will vote just this year. If we're organised and we're united, we can change the world, even at the ballot box. So in the absence of progressive governments, we are the voice of opposition. We are the voice of opposition, but we're also the architects and the voice of progress. So this Congress, delegates, is yours to make. It's interactive, it's open, choose the things you're passionate about, have your say about what works, tell us where you've succeeded, help us guide the frameworks for actions for the next 4 years. We can and we will build workers' power. Will we build workers' power? Yes. And again, will we? Yes. Viva ITUC, viva solidarity.
Yo, I've been hearing a lot of trash talk about unions, saying these ain't the friends to be choosing, out for themselves, not for others. You might have heard unions ain't good for your health, brother. Well, let me spit it for you, got something to say. It's because of unions, we got an 8-hour work day. This ain't no commercial break, my friend. Unions are the peeps who brought you the weekend. Probably never think about it, la-di-da-di. Unions fought hard for your right to party. They're out there to ease your tension with decent wages, health care, and pensions. Now it's like unions blamed for bad weather. But tell me what's wrong with solidarity forever. I want to shout it on high and get it off my chest. The story here is fighting for those who have less. So when unions are bad guys in the propaganda war, think what they've done, where they stand, who they fight for.
So, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, als allererstes möchte ich unserer Generalsekretärin Sharon Borrow für ihren Rechenschaftsbericht danken. Es gibt ja Leute, die sagen, wenn man die Sharon stoppen will, muss man ihr das iPad abnehmen. Ich weiß, das reicht nicht. Man müsste ihr die Seele aus dem Leib reißen, und das geht nicht, und das wollen wir auch nicht, denn sie ist mit Leib und Seele unsere Generalsekretärin. Sie macht das ganz toll, und wir sind stolz darauf, dass du diese Arbeit für uns leistest, Sharon. Herzlichen Dank. So, Kolleginnen und Kollegen, jetzt habe ich als Präsident und als Sitzungspräsident eine schwierige Aufgabe. Ich soll nämlich jetzt 24 Diskussionsbeiträge in 45 Minuten abwickeln. Das wird nicht gehen. Deswegen würde ich euch jetzt um Folgendes bitten. Erstens, jeder Redner, der jetzt noch kommt, hat eine Redezeit von 4 Minuten. Bei 4:30 kriegt er von mir eine Warnung, bei 5 Minuten schalte ich das Mikrofon ab. Ansonsten kommen wir hier nicht durch. Zweitens, wir werden heute das Programm wie folgt ablaufen lassen. Bis 11 Uhr die Diskussion, die werden wir dann unterbrechen und am Mittwoch fortsetzen. Das heißt, alle, die heute nicht zu Wort kommen, die sich aber zu Wort gemeldet haben, werden am Mittwochmorgen das Wort bekommen. Zweitens, Guy Ryder wird um 11 Uhr seine Ansprache an den Kongress halten. Drittens, um 11:15 Uhr findet die Podiumsdiskussion statt, die angekündigte zur wirtschaftlichen Lage. Um 12:15 Uhr wird dann Phil Jennings für die Global Unions reden, als Generalsekretär der Juni, aber im Namen der Global Unions. Dann werden wir in die Pause gehen und heute Nachmittag mit den Subplenaries beginnen. Nur damit das jetzt klar ist vom Vorgehen her. So, Kolleginnen und Kollegen, ich würde euch jetzt darauf noch hinweisen, dass alle diejenigen, die den Kongress adressieren wollen, natürlich die Möglichkeit haben, und wir bitten auch diese Möglichkeit zu nutzen, uns sozusagen interaktiv ihren Segen zu geben, in welcher Form auch immer. Dazu steht zum Beispiel bereit, dass das Kongress-Live-Studio, das ist unmittelbar, wenn ihr aus der Halle kommt, rechter Hand, wo wir dann bitten, eure Grußadressen an den Kongress jeweils in die Kamera zu sprechen. Sie gehen nicht verloren, sie werden ins Netz gestellt und jeder und jede kann sie sehen. Heute Nachmittag wird das dann beginnen, wenn ich das richtig sehe, mit Beiträgen von Kolleginnen und Kollegen aus Lateinamerika. Und wir werden die ganze Woche über bitten, dass Kolleginnen und Kollegen aus allen Erdteilen diese Möglichkeit sich an den Kongress zu wenden über das Kongressstudio Live, dass diese Möglichkeit auch genutzt wird. So, jetzt beginne ich mit der Aussprache. Es ist eine gute Rede, dass nach dem Bericht der Generalsekretärin erstmal einige Delegationen aus aller Welt zu Wort kommen. Als erstes hat Richard Trumka aus den USA das Wort. Rich, it's your turn.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. Brothers and sisters, I'm honored to be with all of you because together we stand for the working men and working women who are the backbone of the global economy. And I don't mean only union members, I mean all working people. You see, whatever our line of work, from taxi drivers to teachers, to auto workers, to BD rollers, to miners, we create value. And whatever our personal beliefs, we're unified by our basic interests and a common vision in which all people who work get a fair share of what we produce. It's that simple. And yet, our vision is not a reality. We have plenty of work to do. 1.2 billion people living in extreme poverty. 202 million people unemployed. Girls kidnapped and sold. Workers killed in ones and twos and by the hundreds. Workers poisoned slowly each day on the job. Yes, we have much work to do. But first, let me say that I fully support the priorities outlined at this Congress to transform our movement into a global power, to organize workers, and to reshape pro-worker policies. We're creating a new and a vibrant global labor movement. And I want to thank Sharon Burrow for her tremendous leadership and for making the ITUC a place of action. Sharon will continue to work with you and your team. And many thanks also to Michael Sommer for your commitment and your leadership here at the ITUC. And Michael, for your friendship. I want to say that we send our thoughts and our prayers for a speedy recovery for your lovely wife. Now, as we speak together today, our economies remain sluggish, held down by the policies of austerity. Workers everywhere are living with the worst global jobs crisis in almost a century. And this is no accident. It was done by design. And don't let anybody tell you any different. Fortunately, many people, including some of our leaders, are starting to understand that the policies of austerity have failed miserably. And yet, while we hear less about austerity and more about investment in good jobs, it's been too much talk and too little action. See, our leaders must invest in our future to promote real growth. Growth based on rising wages and good jobs instead of cheap credit and giveaways to the super rich. Yet as a global labor movement, we have our own work to do. My friends, it's time for all of us to renew our own investments in the future of working people by putting more resources into organizing new members. Workers' priorities are the same everywhere in the world. And if you have any doubt about that, You need only to review the ITUC Global Survey. You see, it's our responsibility to reach those brothers and sisters who need unionism the most. Let's reach out to unorganized port workers in Colombia, to subcontracted workers in Indonesia, to bank workers in the U.S., to healthcare workers in South Africa, to immigrant workers and casual workers who need our voice. You see, the ideals of unionism are something that we all share. Just as we all share the same fate if we allow our ideals to be trampled on by employers like Walmart and Foxconn and T-Mobile and Amazon and Kellogg's and temp agencies like Kelly, who are eager to tramp on our rights. It's our responsibility to stand with every worker who needs us. But our labor organizations aren't large enough to do it alone. If we want to build transformational power, we must build broader coalitions. We have to join forces in civil society on education and women's rights, migrant rights, young workers, and so much more. Let us open our doors and stand together with everyone who shares our values and wants to stand with us. You see, we'll have to struggle for every inch of progress, but that's nothing new. Workers have always had to fight for every inch of progress. But we can and we must win. And to do so, we'll use every tool at our disposal. For example, some of you may have noticed that I asked the General Counsel to include the U.S., the United States, on the ITUC's country watch list. The American practice of firing workers who stand up to form a union, and it happens routinely, puts us on this list. The American practice of deporting immigrant workers who speak out to form a union, and it happens all the time, demands that we be put on this list. So given all of this, what will we do when employers threaten us? We organize. We organize, and then we organize some more. You see, we stand together to create power, and we'll use our power to create good jobs and a new, greener economy. We'll use our power to support collective bargaining and minimum wage laws and social protections and fair tax policies that make corporations pay their fair share. In this global economy, we're all connected, and together we'll make work pay for the people who work, because we wake the world up each and every day, and we tuck her to bed at night. We forge the steel, we sail the ships, we lay the asphalt, we bake the bread, we wash the clothes, we educate the children, we care for the sick, and so much more. And we will not be turned aside, and we will not be denied. It is time for us, all of us, to stand together, to fight together, to organize together, and to win together. An injury to one is an injury to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Solidarity, my brothers and sisters, solidarity for all of us.
Ich bitte jetzt den Kollegen Koga aus Japan ans Rednerpult Und ich bitte den Kollegen Gerd Christiansen und die Kollegin Helen Kelly, sich vorzubereiten. Koga-san, du hast das Wort.
会場の皆さん、おはようございます。日本の連合の古賀です。書記長の報告にもあったように、バンクーバー大会以降も私たちを取り巻く環境はますます厳しい状況となっています。このような情勢の中で、この4年間のシャランバロー書記長の雇用、組織化をはじめ、多岐にわたる運動に対するリーダーシップに心から敬意を表します。さて、2008年経済危機以降、世界を牽引してきた先進諸国にパラダイム転換が必要であることが明らかになりました。しかし、日本も含め各国にいまだ明確な政策転換が起きたとは言えず、むしろ失業や不安定雇用の増加、貧困や格差の拡大など、全世界的に深刻な状況となっています。私はこの世界大会に参加している皆さんと、改めて雇用なくして成長なし、そして雇用の量だけでなく、すべての人にディーセントワークが実現できるよう、ITUC、GUF、さらに私たち加盟組織が一体となって運動を展開することを確認し合いたいと思います。次に、グローバルバリューチェーンの問題についてです。昨年、バングラディッシュ、カンボジアで多くの働く人たちが犠牲になるという痛ましい事故が起き、グローバルバリューチェーンにおける劣悪な労働条件、労働者の権利の侵害が改めて浮き彫りとなりました。グローバルバリューチェーンの頂点に立つ多国籍企業がコスト削減や利益の追求を最優先するために、経済成長と社会的成長が連動しないばかりか、経済の成長が社会の低迷を招くという皮肉な事態に陥っています。こうした問題を解決するためには、ITUC を中心に私たち加盟組織が連携をしながら、グローバルバリューチェーン全体にわたって労働権などの人権を尊重し、責任ある企業行動を徹底するよう求めていかなければなりません。3点目に、それぞれの組織の役割、機能分担での運動展開についてです。言うまでもなく、ITUC が最大限の力を発揮すべきは、IMF や世銀、ILO などの国際機関と G20 をはじめとする政府間会合との交渉です。一方、私たちナショナルセンターは、自国の政府や経営者団体との交流に最大限の力を発揮できる立場にあります。そして、各国ナショナルセンターの状況を身近なところで把握し、支援しているのが地域組織です。私たちは改めて、それぞれの役割、機能を確認し合った上での運動の推進が必要だと思います。また、ITUC は財政的にも厳しい状況が続いており、ITUC 本部、地域組織、そして各加盟組織がそれぞれの役割・機能に徹し、財政に裏付けられた運動の選択と 集中を要望したいと思います。最後に、本大会で退任されるゾンバ会長に心からの感謝、そして今後のご活躍をお祈り申し上げながら意見といたします。大変ありがとうございました。Thank you very much.
古賀さん、どうもありがとう。So, das Wort hat jetzt Gerd Christiansen. Vorbereiten tut sich Helen Kelly und dann Luc Kortebeg. Jetzt Gerd Christiansen.
Først, kjære vertskap, så må jeg få lov å si tusen takk for en fantastisk konsert i går kveld. Og så, ITUC-venner, vi lever i en verden der grådighet og finansiell akrobatikk truer verdens arbeidstakere. Vi lever i en verden der skyldspørsmålet er snudd på hodet. I en verden der vanlige folk, ungdom, arbeidstakere, pensjonister må betale regninger for en krise som er påført oss av andre. Venner, vi sitter med løsninger. Vi krever en helhetlig global politikk, en politikk hvor sosiale og faglige rettigheter står sentralt, en politikk hvor det satses på arbeid og aktiv deltakelse. En politikk for et mer rettferdig skattesystem, og en politikk der finanssektoren skattelegges tøffere enn i dag. Skal vi lykkes med dette, gode venner, så er ITUC vår viktigste kraft. Verdens statsledere, IMF, Verdensbanken må lytte til vår stemme, til vår styrke. Jeg vil rose ITUC for å løfte kvinners rettigheter. Arbeidsledighet, HIV/AIDS, tap av sosiale rettigheter, økende vold, trafficking, rammer nådeløst og ofte kvinner først. I mitt land, Norge, så skryter vi av at vi er et av verdens mest likestilte land. Nå har vi, etter 8 år med sosialdemokratisk styre, fått en konservativ regjering, og det merkes. På område etter område så fremmer denne regjeringen en kvinnefiendtlig politikk. På årets kvinnedag, 8. mars, så måtte vi mobilisere mot angrep på abortloven. Heldigvis så jager vi regjeringen på retrett. Dette viser hvor viktig vi er. Hver eneste dag, over hele verden, og vi må lede an, mine venner. Vi må være best på å løfte frem kvinner i posisjon. Passe på at ledelsen vår reflekterer medlemsmassen, og at vi alltid slår ned på kjønnsbasert vold og diskriminering. ITUC sin kampanje Count Us In er viktig. Neste stopp er å sikre at kvinners rettigheter blir et selvstendig mål i FNs post 2015-agenda. Venner, jeg har lyst til å si dere en ting. Skal vi ha reell makt, få til den endringen som både vi og våre medlemmer fortjener, så må vi jobbe innenfra. Vi må sikre oss gode politiske nettverk på høyest mulig politisk nivå. Jeg vet at i mange land så har ikke folk noe annet valg enn å gå i gaten. Men for en organisasjon som ITUC så må vi alltid være i front i det politiske, strategiske arbeidet. Det er dette vi har lyktes med i Norge. Fagbevegelsen samler millioner av mennesker. Jeg vil avslutte med å snakke om noe som engasjerer enda flere mennesker, nemlig idretten. Internasjonal idrett. Internasjonale idrettsarrangementer må gjennomføres med respekt og anstendighet. Vi har dessverre sett så altfor mange eksempler på det motsatte. Vi så det i Beijing, vi så det i Sotsji, og nå ser vi det i forberedelsene til fotball-VM i Qatar, som både Rainer Hoffmann og Sharon Burrow snakket om. Det er slaveri. Jeg berømmer ITUC for den jobben som gjøres med å sette lys på situasjonen i Qatar. Men samtidig så kan vi gjøre en jobb i hjemlandene våre. I Norge så har LO derfor, i lag med de andre hovedorganisasjonene, inngått et forpliktende samarbeid med idrettsbevegelsen. Avtalen skal sikre at store internasjonale idrettsarrangementer i Norge skal gjennomføres både bærekraftig og anstendig, både økonomisk og miljømessig. Grunnleggende arbeidstakerrettigheter skal respekteres i alle ledd, både på anleggene, i innkjøpspraksisen og i bruk av sponsorer. Norges olympiske komité har forpliktet seg til å ta dette opp med IOC. Og i dag så reiser vi 3 ledere herifra hjem til Norge. Vi har fått et møte med IOC-president Bach, og vi skal fortelle han at i Berlin så sitter 1500 mennesker fra hele verden, og de venter på at vi skal komme tilbake og fortelle at IOC er interessert i å inngå i et samarbeid med ITUC. Det er vårt håp. Takk for oppmerksomheten.
Herzlichen Dank, Kollegin Christiansen. Ich möchte euch darauf hinweisen, dass die Kollegin Nair Goulart, unsere stellvertretende Präsidentin, und die Kollegin Maria Fernanda aus Angola sich über Kongress Live an die Delegierten wenden werden, sodass jetzt, das ist ein gutes Beispiel, wie man die Sitzung straffen kann, sodass jetzt Helen Kelly sprechen wird, nach ihr Le Kortebeck, und ich bitte Modi Giro, sich schon vorzubereiten. Helen, du hast das Wort.
General Secretary, thank you for setting out for us in your speech our challenge ahead, but also for so beautifully putting our hopes and values of the union movement, but most of all, reminding us of our responsibilities and our power. You remind us that union members make a unique commitment to each other and all workers. It is more than signing a membership form. They make a philosophical commitment to an idea that Helen Clark reminded us of yesterday, that humanity is capable of resolving the world's problems if it determines to do so. And it will only do this if it has a collective mechanism to organise. The universality of the union movement, of our values and our goals, the strength of our structures linking working people across the globe, surely means that unions must be uniquely at the centre of any possibility of realising what Helen Clark spoke of. I want to congratulate you on your drive to make this Congress an organising Congress. It's your determination, Sharon, that has secured this unique event in the form that it is. The focus of the ITUC under your leadership is exciting, and the growing interconnectedness and strengthened organising focus, the renewed collaboration with the GUFs makes sense and makes logical use of the strengths of all of our parts. The high-profile campaigns, and in particular the campaign in Qatar, helps us, even in New Zealand, to do our job. Because the Qatar campaign shouts out that unions fight for justice anywhere and any time, and that workers' rights are anything but secure, and that it is through international solidarity that these matters must be fought and will be resolved. And Sharon, I want to thank you for your personal leadership on the Qatar campaign. You're a very brave person, and the way that you have gone there and personally connected and listened to those workers and given them a clear understanding that out here we are fighting for them is hugely significant. You lead by doing, and in doing so you make us proud and engaged, and you offer workers enslaved in Qatar the hopes of achieving the things that we stand for, solidarity and power, which is the only thing that will win them their freedom. The pieces you outline for our future strategy fit together and form a coherent organising strategy across the movement, across what we might call our supply chain, or maybe we should call it our chain of power. When, in not a single country, do the majority of people think that the current economic system is fair, then that is our opportunity. We must change the economic system because it will not fix what humanity needs to be fixed. It can't fix climate change. Its very levers create climate change. Its approach of winner takes all, with no preference for where the wealth goes and little distinction for how the wealth is made, and its lack of inclusion of even a moderator to stop what is happening to the planet, means that without economic change, climate change will continue with unthinkable outcomes. Fighting against climate change means fighting for a new economic order and gives added substance and new potential allies to our fight for an economy that prioritises jobs and decent work. On insecure work, this growing scourge, it's undermining our tax base, wages, economic growth and the social system. And fighting that also means changing the economic system, enabling us to fight for workers' rights, collective bargaining and freedom of association. And union growth is the mechanism to link all of these demands together, right through the union chain of power, right to the shop floor in every country across the globe. Thank you, Sharon, for your leadership over these last 4 years. My council, the New Zealand Council of Trade Unions, is excited and proud to be part of the ITUC, and we commit to supporting the decisions of this conference and playing our role in implementing them. Thank you.
Excuse me. Le Quarterback. Vorbereiten tun sich Kollege Giro und Kollege Reddy aus Indien.
Danke, Michael. Chers collègues et chers amis, la situation actuelle des travailleurs pourrait nous conduire au découragement, au défaitisme. Or, ce sont précisément là les pires conseillers pour les militants syndicaux et les dirigeants syndicaux. Car nous l'oublions parfois, chers amis, nous sommes encore capables de peser de tout notre poids. Depuis notre congrès de Vancouver, nous sommes parvenus au niveau de l'OIT à réaliser la Convention sur le personnel domestique et la recommandation sur le seuil de protection sociale. Nous avons une situation nouvelle en Birmanie, Myanmar. Également, la réintégration des grévistes au Bahreïn et la signature d'un accord historique. Il y a aussi l'après Rana Plaza avec la conclusion de l'accord sur sécurité incendie et bâtiments grâce aux Global Union Federations et la campagne vêtements propres. Dans l'agenda de développement post-2015, le travail décent et la protection sociale constituent enfin des éléments cruciaux. Nous sommes également parvenus à faire élire Guy Ryder à la tête de l'OIT. Je n'attends de personne un optimisme naïf, mais nous avons la capacité d'améliorer la situation des travailleurs pour autant que nous développions une stratégie adéquate envers les employeurs et les gouvernements. L'OIT occupe une place cruciale dans notre stratégie et je vous invite tous à un engagement commun pour les défis futurs de l'OIT, en commençant par la conférence internationale du travail de la semaine prochaine. Commençons avec les migrations, thème mis par le directeur général, de raison d'ailleurs. Nous voulons compléter la Convention 29 sur le travail forcé avec un protocole sur le commerce des êtres humains et les nouvelles formes de travail forcé. Nous allons entamer la discussion sur la formalisation du travail informel dans le but d'arriver à une recommandation l'an prochain. La politique de l'emploi sera également sur la table, tout comme les salaires minimums. Et naturellement, nous voulons, au sein de la commission des normes, mettre au pilori 25 pays qui ne respectent pas les droits des travailleurs. Après l'attaque patronale de 2012, le groupe des travailleurs, sous l'impulsion de la CSI, met tout en œuvre pour garantir le droit de grève. Vous pouvez compter sur nous. Si nécessaire, nous entamerons les démarches au niveau du conseil d'administration de l'OIT en vue de lancer une procédure devant la Cour internationale de justice de La Haye. Et au sein de l'OIT, nous travaillons à la meilleure méthode de garantir le travail des experts, un trésor d'interprétation de conventions constitué en pratiquement 90 ans. Les défis pour l'avenir, renforcer notre influence sur les multinationales. Et malgré l'opposition des employeurs et des gouvernements, il faut développer quand même un instrument concernant l'approvisionnement global et les réseaux d'approvisionnement globaux. Malgré l'opposition des employeurs et des gouvernements, nous voulons mettre sur pied un instrument sur la violence au travail basé sur le genre. Nous voulons renforcer l'influence de l'OIT sur la politique des pays en difficulté, comme les pays programmes en Europe et ailleurs. Et last but not least, Monsieur le Directeur général, cher Guy, les travailleurs veulent participer à l'élaboration du futur du travail en prévision du centenaire de l'OIT en 2019. Avec votre support, chers amis, et le support d'ACTRAF, l'OIT reste l'instrument le plus efficace pour assurer aux travailleurs les droits, la qualité du travail et la qualité de vie qu'ils méritent pour renforcer le pouvoir des travailleurs, to build workers' power. Thank you, merci.
Danke, Luc, für deine Worte. Ich möchte Luc Kortebeck auch nochmal persönlich danken für seine Arbeit, die er für die Arbeitnehmergruppe der Internationalen Arbeitsorganisation macht und seine Arbeit auch als stellvertretender Präsident des Internationalen Gewerkschaftsbundes. Er ist uns ein langer, treuer Freund, der sehr, sehr viel für unsere Bewegung getan hat. Luc, herzlichen Dank. So, ich komme jetzt zum nächsten Redner, das ist Modi Giro. Ich kündige an, dass der übernächste Redner dann der Kollege Reddy aus Indien sein wird. Und der letzte Redner in der Diskussion heute Morgen wird Kollege João Felicio von CUT Brasil sein. Kollege Giro, du hast das Wort. Modi.
Merci, camarade Michael. Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier nos camarades de la DGB qui se sont mobilisés pour nous accueillir dans cette belle ville de Berlin et tenir notre 3e congrès mondial dans d'excellentes conditions. Notre troisième congrès se tient dans un contexte de crise profonde. Et les chiffres mentionnés dans les différents documents de travail montrent la gravité de la situation. L'emploi est en baisse, le chômage augmente surtout chez les jeunes, la protection sociale est réduite et les violations quotidiennes des droits des travailleurs sont enregistrées partout. L'investissement pour la santé et la sécurité au travail devient un luxe pour les employeurs. Mes chers camarades, le thème de notre congrès, renforcer le pouvoir des travailleurs, est pertinent et doit nous conduire à une analyse objective de la situation économique et sociale dans le monde depuis le dernier congrès de Vancouver en 2010. Tous les sous-thèmes qui sont abordés à ce congrès sont importants, mais je voudrais insister, entre autres, sur le renforcement des droits des travailleurs et des travailleurs, condition indispensable pour construire des syndicats forts, capables de s'engager dans des luttes pour une meilleure distribution des revenus au sein de la société. Mes chers camarades, je souscris totalement à l'ensemble des propositions faites par le secrétariat général et contenues dans la déclaration du Congrès et les cadres d'action relatifs à la réalisation des droits, des emplois durables et des revenus sûrs et une protection sociale, celui de la croissance syndicale. Et je suis persuadé que les débats qui vont suivre dans les sous-plénières seront très intéressants. La pertinence des sujets que nous allons aborder à ce troisième congrès innovant, au regard des multiples défis auxquels le mouvement syndical doit faire face dans ce monde en crise, démontre encore une fois que la CIC demeure une organisation d'avant-garde. Je voudrais saisir cette opportunité pour féliciter toute l'équipe dirigeante de la CIC, vous-même, Monsieur le Président, le secrétariat général, et particulièrement notre camarade secrétaire général Sharon Barrow, pour tous les efforts et les sacrifices consentis pour maintenir allumée la flamme de la CIC dans un environnement économique fort difficile et l'encourager à poursuivre le travail entamé en tirant le bilan de nos réussites et de nos faiblesses pour des victoires futures. Nous devons ensemble poursuivre le travail déjà entamé, mais comprendre également que l'efficacité de notre action dépendra de l'engagement des militants et des militantes à la base, d'où la nécessité d'inscrire comme priorité dans nos plans d'action l'exigence d'un modèle de croissance économique inclusif et porteur d'emplois durables. Le renforcement des syndicats dans la lutte pour la conquête des droits des travailleuses et des travailleurs. L'organisation et la syndicalisation. Nous sommes, vous l'avez dit dans les documents, 200 millions de syndiqués sur 1,7 milliard de travailleurs dans l'économie formelle. Il nous faut donc renforcer le pouvoir des femmes pour renforcer le pouvoir des travailleurs, car les femmes représentent 40% de la main-d'œuvre mondiale et seulement 15% dans les instances de décision. Nous devons mettre l'accent sur la paix et la démocratie, la migration, le travail des enfants, mettre l'accent sur les changements climatiques et aussi sur un commerce équitable. Enfin, nous ne devons pas oublier le secteur informel qui, dans certains pays de l'Afrique, représente 65% du PIB. Je voudrais terminer, chers camarades, en félicitant encore une fois la secrétaire générale et la remercier, camarade Sharon Barrow, pour la tournée effectuée dans certains pays de l'Afrique. L'Afrique a besoin de cela. Et ce sont des visites attendues par les syndicats africains. Et ne l'oublions pas, l'Afrique, c'est le continent où il y a le plus d'inégalités après l'Amérique latine. Mais l'Afrique émerge et reste un continent d'avenir. Je vous souhaite bon congrès. Vive la CIC.
Danke, Modi. Modi hat nicht nur als Vertreter des Senegal gesprochen, sondern auch als Präsident unserer afrikanischen Regionalorganisation. Das Wort hat jetzt der Kollege Reddy.
Thank you, President, for giving me opportunity for speaking on this Congress. We are here in a beautiful city of Berlin to attend the third ITUC World Congress started on the 18th and concluding on 23rd. I congratulate the DGP for making a wonderful arrangement for the World Congress. I am coming from a developing country. We have got unique problems in organizing the trade union movement in this area. Particularly, 90% of the workers coming from the informal sector in this country, developing country. Informal sector already is there, and the organized sector also gradually converting into a informally. This is the new phenomenon in the global economy. Sir, our team today, the Congress team, build up the workers' power. While looking on the theme of the building of the workers' power, which itself means that we have to build the workers' power through the bringing more and more workers into the trade union fold. We have to really a representative of the working people in our respective countries, and to strengthen the trade union movement regionally and globally. If I say about my region, and especially South Asia, there is a trend of recruiting a new contract worker and daily based workers, informal workers in the organized sector. It means the organized workers gradually vanishing slowly, and informal sector workers, including the women and youth and irregular workers, are recruited, and it is very huge task for the trade union to organize them into the trade union fold with a meager earnings. The employers, especially corporate and multinationals, are concentrating on making a profit. Most of the jobs are converted into informal jobs. Unfortunately, union membership is slowly declining trend in most of the countries. It is a matter of serious concern, but also challenges. Challenge of increasing our membership. In Indian situation, our country is the opposite. The union membership grown tremendously during the last few years. In the current verification process of my organization, that the ITUC has submitted membership of claiming 33 million. This includes the significant number of workers in informal economy, rural workers, and the workers, irregular workers arrangement. The membership drive initiated during the few years which enabled the ITUC to register new unions for informal sector, and from its 10 million membership in 2006, now it has reached to 33 million membership of the organization. Sir, though the efforts of the organized and unorganized workers in the informal economy are being made by trade union, the majority of the workers remain unorganized and unprotected under the labor laws. The issue of the working condition, informal economy, has been high on the agenda of the union for quite some years now. We would think now eliminate the negative aspect of the informality while preserving the job and income generation potential informal economy. How to promote a decent work in these two work outside the informal market, such as unregulated wage workers, self-employed workers, domestic home workers. Therefore, the trade in movement of the India, all the central trade in organization, multiple trade in organization about numbering 12, we have come to one platform, irrespective of our political affiliation. We all come to the one single platform and formed a united front, and in which we are all working together, all type of trade union to unite and work together to increase the membership and protect the interests of the workers. These are the first step the Indian trade union movement has taken, forgetting the differences among the trade union. I may say to my General Secretary, Madam Sharon Barrow, that we are strengthening the working class movement in the developing countries, uniting ourselves first. Trade union rivalities are eliminating. Gradually we are coming together as a united trade union organization to strengthen the trade movement, to increase the workers' power of the world. This is I once again congratulate the President, ITUC and the General Secretary, their inspiring speech and strengthening our belief to increase and growth our trade union movement in developing countries. Thank you.
Danke, Kollege Reddy. Aus Zeitgründen ist jetzt der letzte Diskussionsredner der Kollege João Felicio. João, du hast das Wort.
Bom dia a todos e a todas. Inicialmente eu gostaria de cumprimentar a companheira Sharon, nossa secretária-geral, pela fala. A nossa central sindical tem muita identidade política com a análise que ela fez aqui. Portanto, há uma concordância, com certeza, do movimento sindical brasileiro pela forma como a nossa secretária-geral tem conduzido a nossa organização, bem como o presidente Michael Summer. Eu queria falar apenas de dois assuntos que para o movimento sindical brasileiro são assuntos de uma importância muito grande. A forma como tem sido conduzido ultimamente as políticas econômicas de cada governo, e os governos, historicamente, eles têm feito uma aliança muito mais forte com o capital do que conosco. Na sua grande maioria, poucos são os governos que estabelecem uma política discutida com trabalhadores. Discutem muito mais as questões com o sistema financeiro, com o capital, do que com as organizações sindicais. Isso tem levado, na maioria dos países, a uma excessiva concentração de renda. Por isso que para nós, da CUT Brasil, para o movimento sindical brasileiro, a campanha que a CSI faz tem uma importância muito grande, que é a taxação da riqueza. Nós não vamos diminuir a distância entre ricos e pobres se não taxarmos a riqueza de uma forma profundamente eficiente. A herança, as grandes fortunas, a renda, a ciranda financeira, as transações financeiras e a forma como o capital investe nos paraísos fiscais, que também o fazem para fugir da taxação. Para nós é uma das formas para diminuir a distância entre ricos e pobres. A forma como tem sido conduzida a economia no mundo todo nos últimos anos tem feito com que se aumente cada vez mais a distância entre ricos e pobres. Para nós é uma questão fundamental nas relações capital e trabalho, porque isso tem afetado a democracia. Na imensa maioria dos países do mundo todo, grupo de extrema-direita tem surgido nos processos eleitorais e tem obtido uma quantidade muito grande de votos, inclusive da juventude. Porque a juventude ela tem uma desesperança muito grande em relação aos governos, acabam não levando em consideração os partidos políticos, não levando em consideração as organizações sindicais, é uma descrença total em relação à democracia. Então, o segundo assunto que eu gostaria de falar aqui é sobre liberdade e democracia. Para nós também, nos últimos anos, é inaceitável a forma, esse tipo de relação que os organismos internacionais estabelecem com o mundo sindical e com os governos, onde impõe a sua lógica, acaba afetando também a democracia, acaba afetando a liberdade. E para nós a liberdade e democracia não pode ser questões abstratas, tem que ser uma questão concreta, relacionada com as condições de vida, porque um cidadão que é assassinado, para ele liberdade e democracia acaba sendo um elemento abstrato, porque ele foi assassinado. Qual é a liberdade e a democracia que um trabalhador na Turquia teve quando ele morreu nas minas de carvão dentro da Turquia? Qual é a liberdade que um trabalhador palestino tem quando tem um muro que o impede de ter a livre circulação? Qual é a liberdade e a democracia que tem um trabalhador da Colômbia, um sindicalista que é assassinado? Qual é a liberdade e a democracia que tem um sindicalista na Turquia que foi duramente agredido pelo assessor do presidente da República? Qual é a liberdade e a democracia que tem um povo quando no meu país um operário chega à presidência da República e ele é duramente atacado pelos meios de comunicação? Portanto, liberdade e democracia tem que ser para os nossos povos, para a nossa juventude, para jovens, mulheres, algo concreto que se relaciona com as condições de vida. Se nós não tivermos condições de vida plenamente atendidas pelos nossos governos, a população fica descrente da liberdade e da democracia. Aqui nesse plenário está o que há de melhor do movimento sindical internacional, onde nós aqui praticamos um sindicalismo livre e um sindicalismo com liberdade, um sindicalismo com democracia, onde as convenções da OIT são referenciais importantes para nós. Só que da forma como essa aliança permanente que os governos fazem com o capital, tem trazido, na maioria dos países, uma perda de direitos históricos. Nós queremos que ocorra em nossos países aquilo que ocorreu aqui em Berlim alguns anos atrás, quando um muro foi derrubado pelos alemães. Reunificaram a Alemanha e deram uma lição para o mundo, de como é que se constrói um mundo livre e um mundo democrático. Para nós, a conquista de governos do campo democrático e popular, e fazendo a relação entre o movimento sindical com a discussão de projetos políticos, é uma boa alternativa. O movimento sindical não pode simplesmente pautar questões relativas só ao mundo do trabalho. Nós temos que pautar nas nossas resoluções, nos nossos congressos, questões relativas à visão de mundo. Temos uma plataforma de desenvolvimento global. Aí sim nós teremos condições de fazer uma disputa política com o capital. E fazermos opção, porque muitos dos nossos governos, inclusive aqui na Europa, acabam fazendo um discurso de que é necessário ampliar direitos, tomam posse, logo em seguida fazem reformas retirando direitos. Não é esse tipo de governo que nos interessa. O que nos interessa são governos que respeitem a organização sindical, que garantam direito de negociação coletiva, que lute para diminuir a exclusão social, que lute para diminuir a pobreza, que faça investimento nas políticas sociais. No mundo solidário que nós defendemos, não cabe a FMI e também não cabe a FIFA. Não é possível uma organização mundial que vai organizar um campeonato de futebol lá no Catar, percebe-se que tem trabalho escravo e nada faz. Por isso, Sharon, que nós nos relacionamos e concordamos muito com a campanha que você está liderando, para que nós tenhamos um mundo solidário, onde a nossa organização sindical seja respeitada, onde as resoluções da CSI tenham ressonância na base. Nós não podemos transformar as resoluções dos nossos congressos aqui, este congresso, apenas em recomendação. Isso para nós tem que ser um norte. Nós temos que partir para as nossas regiões, para os nossos países e construirmos aquilo que nós decidimos aqui. Aí sim que nós vamos ter um sindicalismo global, de luta, democrático, mas com um forte enraizamento na sociedade. Da mesma maneira como o capital faz um discurso contra o mundo do trabalho, nós temos que fazer um discurso pela nossa agenda, pelos nossos direitos e pela luta que representa hoje o movimento sindical internacional. Obrigado em nome da Central Única dos Trabalhadores do Brasil.
Danke, João Felicio. Für diejenigen, die es hier im Saal noch nicht wissen, João Felicio ist vom Weltvorstand nominiert worden als nächster Präsident des ITUC. Er wird dann die Freude haben, wie ich auch, auf die Einhaltung der Redezeit auf Kongressen zu achten. Das macht dann besonders viel Spaß, aber das lassen wir mal jetzt beiseite. Ich komme jetzt nochmal zu den normalen satzungsmäßigen Regeln, nämlich, dass dieser Kongress sich sehr konkret auch mit den Dokumenten befassen muss, die ihm vorgelegt worden sind. Sharon Borrer hat in ihrem Rechenschaftsbericht zu den Punkten 8 und 9 Stellung genommen, nämlich dem Report über die Tätigkeit des Generalsekretariats und den Finanzen. Wir hatten hierzu eine Aussprache. Wir werden die Aussprache mit anderen Diskussionsrednern fortsetzen am Mittwochmorgen. Alle, die bislang auf der Liste stehen, bleiben auf der Liste und werden dann am Mittwochmorgen die Gelegenheit haben zu reden. Um aber den Kongressablauf weiter vorantreiben zu können, würde ich jetzt gerne bitten, dass wir die beiden offiziellen Kongressdokumente, wie sie in der Kongress-Website zu finden sind, nämlich den Report von Sharon und den Finanzreport annehmen. Erhebt sich dagegen Widerspruch? Das ist nicht der Fall. Ich gucke nochmal, das ist nicht der Fall. Dann sind hiermit die Kongressdokumente unter Punkt 8 und 9 angenommen. So, jetzt freuen wir uns auf einen Höhepunkt unseres Kongresses, nämlich auf die Rede unseres Generalsekretärs AD, also der es nicht mehr ist, aber jetzt den Generaldirektors der Internationalen Arbeitsorganisation, Comrade Guy Ryder.
President, dear Michael, General Secretary, dear Sharon, delegates and observers, dear friends, I think that you will all well understand why it is such an honour and a personal pleasure for me to address this third ITUC Congress. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you, and thank you also for making it possible for me to do so as Director General of the ILO. You made that happen. Colleagues, you've come to Berlin with clear intentions to build greater power for workers, to make trade unions across the globe bigger, stronger, to win universal respect for workers' rights, and to make decent, sustainable jobs and social protection accessible to all. And these are goals which unite the ITUC and the ILO. They make us partners in the continuing struggle for social justice. They require of us that we bring our shared values to the task of generating shared prosperity for all. And we come to that struggle mindful of what others too easily forget, that this prosperity is entirely the outcome of human labour, that this labour is not a commodity, it is sentient, it is endowed with rights, that its interests must be at the centre of policy making, which must be organised to meet its needs and in accordance with those rights. The ITUC Constitution of 2006, like the ILO Constitution of 1919, and the Declaration of Philadelphia of 1944, which has been quoted here, speak to these imperatives and call us to the defence of principles unchanged over a century, which has seen the world of work transformed. And if the ILO was born as the world emerged from the cataclysm of its first global conflict, the ITUC came into existence on the eve of its descent into the first generalised crisis of the globalised economy. The aftermath of that crisis, unfinished, the Great Recession, reminds us of the truth that lasting peace really does depend upon social justice. Colleagues, the crisis has taken, it continues to take, an appalling toll of human suffering, with workers taking the brunt. Your Congress documents record that. Global unemployment at record levels, still rising, and still rising on a path that will not be reversed by today's anemic recovery in growth. The labour share of global income continuing to fall, fueling intolerable and growing inequality, which is offensive to our most basic concepts of social justice, damaging to our capacities of growth and job creation, but also a danger to the very stability of our societies. A financial sector still remote from its proper functions as facilitator of the real productive economy, resistant to the regulation needed to save it from its own worst instincts and the rest of us from the devastating consequences of its excesses. The fight to end world poverty inexcusably retarded, the challenges of climate change as yet unmet, and the world an increasingly dangerous place. Wherever you have come from to Berlin, in all of your neighbourhoods, the cold winds of austerity and of multiplying conflict and social tension are not far away from you. And you will, as you must, focus at this Congress on the most serious violations of fundamental workers' rights in the world, and they are far too many, and it is the ILO's responsibility to stand with you for their elimination. Many of you in this hall have been their victim, and I salute your courage and I salute your fortitude. Some of the worst situations, colleagues, are defined by national frontiers. Those countries which, as we have heard yesterday and again this morning, have still not assumed their responsibilities as ILO member states to respect fundamental worker rights. And other violations have to do with processes still incubating, deeply embedded in the processes of globalization, global supply chains, migration, trafficking, and the type of enterprise mobility that allows the evasion and the avoidance of tax, of the employment relationship, of collective bargaining, and of trade union organization. And I think we need to get to grips with both dimensions. From an ILO perspective, that means firstly and crucially ensuring the integrity, the strength, the authority of our standard supervisory system. It is a unique and irreplaceable benchmark for global justice at work. But it is also, as you know, under stress. Those of you who will be travelling to Geneva in a few days for the annual ILO conference know that what is at stake in the ongoing controversy over the right to strike is of inestimable importance, and we have to find solutions. We have to find solutions quickly. We have to find solutions that do not compromise what is of such fundamental historic importance to the labour movement. And at the same time, colleagues, the tragedy just over 1 year ago of Rana Plaza has truly been a game changer in the politics of supply chain management. For that, we owe real thanks to the global unions who have broken new ground with the Accord on fire and building safety. And we owe it to the 1,100 dead of Rana Plaza to go further. Global supply chains that deliver cheap goods and gigantic profits at one end, and poverty wages and lethal working conditions at the other, can no longer be tolerated. We can change them, and change them we must. And in the same vein, colleagues, the only possible response to the 301 victims at the Soma mine in Turkey last week is to act now and to act decisively, and that's exactly, I can share with you, what the ILO is doing. And let me repeat what others have said. Their deaths had nothing to do with destiny. They were not unavoidable collateral damage in a hazardous industry. They were the result of human negligence and failure, and the corrosive notion that even human life has to be weighed in the scales against efficiency and competitiveness. We understand, colleagues, that the scale of the challenges we face together, and that scale of the challenge must encourage, not deter us, and we should not make the mistake of ignoring the advances that have been made, the victories that have been won, because, as Sharon reminded us in her speech, they are considerable too. And as the ITUC calls working people to join its struggle, let's not forget that in general, people prefer to be on the winning side, and that means joining a movement which demonstrates its capacity to defend their interests and to bring real change for good. Colleagues, it matters. It matters that in the ITUC, the world's trade union movement has created the largest democratic movement in the world. But it depends on the people, it depends on the organizations in this hall, whether that extraordinary potential can be brought effectively to meet the formidable challenges ahead. Internationalism is a natural reflex of trade unionism. Of that I have no doubt. But I know as well that internationalism does not and will not function automatically. It requires leadership. It requires organization. It requires the innovation so in evidence at this Congress. It requires that the very diverse traditions, cultures, and practices of trade unionism around the world come together in shared purpose and mutual respect. It will thrive only with your commitment, and it needs to be rooted deeply in the life of the ITUC's affiliates and to be close and responsive to its members. Do all of that, colleagues, and recognizing that no force on earth is weaker than the feeble power of one, the ITUC truly can become the greatest force beneath the sun. And in this you have no weapons more powerful than your unity and your principles. For its part, the ILO faces the same task of advancing its goals in conditions of unprecedented change and a frequently inhospitable political climate. And since the votes of your representatives got me elected, the efforts of our organisation have been focused on equipping it to be more influential in advancing justice at work. Building ILO power has involved sharpening our technical and analytical work, focusing on key priorities, advocating for jobs and growth in the G20, using our partnership with international organisations to have them better understand why organising and collective bargaining are good for equity and good for our economies. It's meant working to ensure that decent work and social protection are included as explicit goals in the United Nations post-2015 development agenda. And we need your help to make all of that happen. And equally, colleagues, in a Congress which is building worker power, we have to make the cause for dialogue, we have to make the cause for talking. It's the way the ILO itself does its work. And we've sought to repair and to reactivate social dialogue where it has been a sacrificial victim to the perceived imperatives of austerity. The ILO will advance to its centenary. It will take place just 1 year after the next ITUC Congress, committed to important new initiatives, to re-dynamise our commitment to equality for women at work, to make decent work a guiding principle along the road to a sustainable green economy, to play our full part in the global push to end extreme poverty by 2030, and lastly, but not leastly, by launching a centenary initiative on the future of work, which I trust can serve to restore policy priorities and values which are today in grave danger of being lost. Colleagues, to paraphrase Willy Brandt, who was quoted yesterday, from an ILO perspective, the ITUC may not be everything, but without it, there's not very much. In this city, Berlin, once divided, now united, the forces of global democratic trade unionism, once divided, now united, meet. Much depends on your deliberations, on your decisions, and what you do to act on those decisions. The different currents that converged at Vienna 8 years ago, flowed on to Vancouver, and now to Berlin, can and will take you further with increased strength in this common house, with your unflinching resolve and with your solidarity in which the ITUC was born. You will be making changes. One of your leaders, a son of this city, Michael Sommer, steps down from his national and international duties at this time. I had the chance to pay my personal tribute to Michael last week at the DGB Congress from this podium. And I want to reiterate before this global audience my admiration, my respect, my friendship for Michael. I learnt a lot from you, Michael, about trade unionism, about Bertolt Brecht, about a lot of things, and I won't forget it. Colleagues, you will succeed in building working power. You will meet that challenge of the 20 million, and you must, because the echoes of history tell us everything about what is at stake. We've heard a lot of history yesterday and today. This city was one of the European capitals where global war was declared exactly 100 years ago. 100 years ago, the international solidarity of labour was broken by the siren calls of nationalism and of aggression. In the words of a then political leader of my country, the lights were turned off across this continent, and indeed they were not to come on again in the lifetime of all those who witnessed it. Today, the danger is that the lights are off for a whole generation of young workers, excluded from decent work, shut out from society. For them, above all, the lights must be turned on again, and you must be the ones to do it, because it falls to you, all of you in the ITUC, to act on the lessons of history to which others may prefer to be deaf, to give leadership where it is so badly needed, and to hold the line on social justice. Colleagues, you will probably make a few enemies along the way, but you might just bring a better world and a better future for the next generations. Good luck.
Thank you, Guy. Rainer Hoffmann said this morning, we are sitting in a new house of the unions, the labor unions. And Guy Ryder was one of the architects of this new house. And Guy, thank you very much for what you have done for our movement and what you are doing now for the movement of the regulation of work all over the ILOs. We are very proud to have you as a general director of the ILO. And we know it's difficult now to handle the affairs with this ILO. And you can be sure nobody will take everything on our right to strike. This is our most important right, and we will refuse it everywhere. Und ich danke dir sehr dafür, was du für uns getan hast und tust. Wir wissen, dass du jetzt in einer anderen Rolle bist. Und wir sind stolz darauf, dass wir dich in diese Rolle wählen konnten. Wir haben große Hoffnung in das, was du tust. Aber du kannst auch sicher sein, die Arbeitnehmergruppe, insbesondere auch unter Führung von Luc Kortebeck und anderen, werden alles tun, dir den Rücken zu stärken. Und wir stärken dir natürlich auch den Rücken dafür, dass du sozusagen auch die Kraft hast, gegen einige Angriffe von Regierungen und Arbeitgebern dich zu wehren. Du hast unsere Unterstützung, du hast unsere Solidarität, genauso wie wir dir dafür dankbar sind, was du in deinem Leben für die internationale Gewerkschaftsbewegung getan hast. Guy, herzlichen Dank für alles, was du getan hast. Thank you very much. So, Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir hängen ziemlich im Zeitplan und sozusagen wird jetzt die Diskussion, die jetzt folgt, sozusagen das erste Opfer dieses Hängens sein. Sie wird nämlich nur bis 12:15 Uhr dauern und dann werde ich sie abklingeln, egal wie lange sie geht. Aber sie ist wichtig für uns. Sie ist wichtig, weil wir uns auseinandersetzen wollen mit der Austeritätspolitik und ihren Fehlern. Ich habe da gestern bereits etwas in meiner Eröffnungsrede dazu gesagt. Ich übergebe jetzt das Wort an Larry Elliott. Er ist Wirtschaftsredakteur der britischen Tageszeitung Guardian. Er wird uns jetzt durch die nächsten 45 Minuten führen. Larry, du hast das Wort.
Thank you very much. Welcome. My name's Larry Elliott. I'm the economics editor of The Guardian. We're here to try and put the world to rights. We've got 40 minutes to do so, and we'll do our best to get through what's quite a busy agenda. Let me just set the scene. It's 7 years since the financial crisis began. It's almost 6 years since the collapse of Lehman Brothers. It's 4 years this month that the Eurozone crisis began. The world's been changed, but not perhaps in the way that trade unions, organised labour imagined it would or hoped it would. It's business as usual with a vengeance. You can see from the ITUC's own poll that this is the age of insecurity, it's the age of poverty wages, it's the age of unemployment. So on this panel today, we're going to talk about the fault lines in the global economy, the failure of austerity. How do we shift the policy focus from austerity, high unemployment, persistent poverty, and rising inequality to growth, quality job creation, poverty reduction, raising incomes and social justice? Let me just introduce my panel very briefly. On my immediate right is Bernadette Segal. She's the ITUC General Secretary. I'm going to ask her to speak first. On her right is Jayati Ghosh of the Nehru University in New Delhi. On her right is Soni Kapoor, who runs the Redefine think tank. Last but not least, on the far right is John Evans of the ITUC ITUC. I'm going to ask them all to make some brief opening remarks, 3 or 4 minutes, and then we'll open up a discussion. Bernadette, can I just start with you? The Eurozone's been the epicenter of the evolving crisis these last 4 years. The fiscal hawks won the debate there with pretty disastrous consequences. Eurozone's marred in very low growth, mass unemployment. How do we shift the focus now to infrastructure, investment, incomes and jobs?
Oui, ma première réaction, c'est de dire il ne faut pas croire qu'ils ont gagné le débat. Même si pour l'instant ils l'ont gagné, je pense que c'est extrêmement démotivant si nous pensons que la chose est perdue. Et je pense que pour les syndicats, pour la Confédération européenne des syndicats, c'est extrêmement important de croire que nous pouvons faire une différence. Et je pense que nous le pouvons. Je crois que l'histoire a certainement montré que les choses pouvaient changer, que tout n'allait pas dans le même sens. Et il y a quand même, à l'heure actuelle, je pense en particulier à Thomas Piketty, un certain nombre d'intellectuels, d'économistes, qui montrent que les choses ne peuvent pas continuer comme ça. Donc mon premier message, c'est de dire non, il ne faut pas baisser les bras et croire que le débat est perdu pour nous à jamais. Certainement, il faut changer le focus. Et pour changer le focus, je crois qu'il faut mettre les points sur les i et dire qu'il est absolument inacceptable qu'on considère que le chômage soit un produit dommageable, regrettable, mais nécessaire des politiques d'aujourd'hui. Or, c'est ce qui se passe. Ce qui se passe aujourd'hui, c'est qu'on a dit, bien, il faut sauver les banques, certainement, il fallait sauver les banques, mais c'est dommage, mais c'est comme ça. On va avoir 12% de chômage en Europe pour les prochaines années. Croire que ce sous-produit-là est quelque chose de nécessaire, je pense que pour nous, syndicats, il faut vraiment changer cette façon de voir et montrer qu'on ne peut pas considérer que le chômage et que la précarité sont comme des sous-produits nécessaires d'une politique économique qui nous mènerait par le bout du nez. Je souligne la question de la précarité. Parce que non seulement nous avons des problèmes sur la question du chômage, mais le fait que le travail précaire se développe, y compris dans un pays comme l'Allemagne, de façon vraiment très très problématique, est un problème qui est aussi important que le problème du chômage. Quand on a des travailleurs qui gagnent 300, 400 euros par mois et qui sont obligés de demander à l'État de compenser leur salaire pour pouvoir survivre, des travailleurs pauvres, alors on est quand même dans une situation tout à fait inacceptable. Je crois que pour changer le focus, il faut aussi montrer que les économies qui réussissent ne sont pas des économies qui sont à la baisse. Les économies qui réussissent, je pense aux pays nordiques, mais je pourrais en mentionner d'autres, l'Allemagne aussi, sont des économies dont les salaires peuvent être très élevés, mais qui ont un dialogue social, qui ont des relations sociales très, très fortes et qui ne parient pas sur la baisse des salaires, qui ne parient pas sur la baisse de la protection sociale, mais qui mettent l'importance sur le dialogue, sur la négociation et sur les bons emplois. Je pense aussi que pour changer le focus, il faut que nous montrions que ces politiques d'austérité ont échoué. Il y a différentes manières de le montrer. En tout cas, en Europe, la dette des pays en difficulté ne diminue pas et il y a une déstabilisation sociale. Je pense en particulier à la montée des populismes en Europe qui est extrêmement préoccupante et qui devrait, de mon point de vue, préoccuper ceux qui ont mis les politiques d'austérité en avant. Donc, pour nous, pour changer le focus, il faut montrer que socialement, les politiques qui réussissent sont les politiques qui respectent un certain modèle social. Pour nous, le modèle social européen qui est relations sociales, services publics, protection sociale, et que ça, politiquement, c'est le plus important. Je pense que la Confédération européenne des syndicats a un rôle important à jouer parce que nous avons des institutions en face de nous et que nous essayons, je pense parfois avec un certain succès, pas assez, mais quand même tout n'est pas négatif, que nous essayons de faire bouger des institutions et que dans la mesure où ces institutions peuvent bouger, nous pouvons aussi aider le mouvement syndical international à aller dans le bon sens. Merci.
Thank you very much indeed, Bernadette. JRT, over to you. Let's look at it from the point of view of the emerging and developing countries. Traditionally, the model's been based around export-led growth, very big informal sector. How can we shift the model there towards a more employment-rich, more domestic demand-led growth and a bigger formal and a less big informal sector?
You know, I think for most emerging countries now, that particular model has run out of steam. We really can't go there anymore. And if you look at the recent trends in the global economy, it's very evident that all the major developing countries that were growing very rapidly in the previous decade have slowed down, and they're facing constraints. The first is that we're still very sharply affected by what happens in the north. The myth of decoupling, I think, has been completely disproved. So we're affected by slowing exports to the north. We're affected by all the monetary policies, whether it's quantitative easing or it is tapering. Either way, we end up suffering the fallout. So the first part is that we know that we're going to get the bad news from the north. The second part is that our own model, the one that was based on export-led growth, as you said, and a low-wage economy simply to deliver more and more goods as exports, that is completely running out of steam. What countries have tried to do is to shift to domestic markets, but not by increasing wages and employment. Instead, they have generated domestic credit bubbles in housing, in consumer goods, in a range of places, and that basically we know that these bubbles end in tears. Instead of actually increasing taxes on the rich to spend more government incomes, to have more government spending to deliver basic needs for the people, we are actually just trying to generate bubbles. Already many of these bubbles are bursting or coming to an end, even in China, even in India, and a number of other countries. So very clearly, we have to shift. The third big constraint we're facing is ecological. And it's not just climate change. Of course, many of us are the frontline victims of climate change, but it's not just that. We have huge problems of over-extraction of natural resources, of degradation, pollution, congestion, and that means that the previous pattern where we didn't bother about natural resources and we didn't care about the conditions of labor, that we no longer can pursue because it is now affecting growth. I think it is the case that there are good examples. It's not true that there are no alternatives. We have seen in Latin America a number of countries that have tried to deliver a much more employment-rich, wage-led pattern of expansion. We are seeing some of this in sub-Saharan Africa in a few countries, one or two countries in Asia too. We are seeing the beginnings of change. So I think it can be done, and I think there are countries that are trying to do it. But to do it, we need an enabling international environment. And that is definitely not, at the moment, available. It's not just the international financial architecture and the fact that capital is so mobile that it can destroy lives everywhere within a twinkling, but it is also the whole range of other forces. It's like the regional trade agreements, the WTO, the operations of global corporations, and the privatization and concentration of knowledge, which have affected our ability to adjust to particular circumstances. So we need to democratize the international structure as well. I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Sonia, a question for you. After the Wall Street crash and the Great Depression of the 1930s, enormous strides were made to tighten up rules on banks and capital. There was talk of doing so after this crisis, repeating what was done in the 1930s. How successful have we been in doing that? Have we done a complete job on reforming the banks? Are they still too big to fail? You know, does the financial transaction tax mark a big step forward, or are we just tinkering with the problem here?
I'd probably give the effort no more than 5 out of 10, and partly this is because the focus of the effort has been wrong. The underlying assumption within the whole financial reform agenda has been that were it not for the crash, if only Lehman hadn't failed, everything was working fine. If only we can stop another Lehman Brothers failing. And that, my friends, is the biggest problem. At least for the past 20 to 30 years, since the Big Bang liberalization started in the city of London and spread around, the financial system has not been delivering for the real economy. Money, there's loads of it sloshing around, has not gone to where it delivers the highest return to the real economy. Money has instead chased investments, where the tax rate paid by the company are lower, or it has chased investments where the wages being paid are lower, or where workers don't have safety regulations, or where the environment is being irreparably harmed. And all of us are now paying the price. In the short term, individually, this had made sense for financial capital. This has also made sense for your money. You are also responsible. The 15 trillion US dollars of money that is your pension money, where you have trustees, has also been engaging in this behavior. And we are now paying the price. What we need now is a global investment compact. The logic behind austerity has been that there isn't enough money. My friends, there has never been as much money in the world as is sloshing around now. All the central banks, all the quantitative easing, all the asset managers, all the pension funds, there is money plenty. There is money from sovereign wealth funds too. 100 trillion of it. The problem is it is not going where it needs to. Every country, while making the wage policy, every company while making the wage policy, assumes that every other country, that every other company, it's paying its workers well, so that they will be able to buy the cars being made in Germany, so that they will be able to buy the clothes being made in Italy. And of course, that is where the whole logic fails. There is new action, promising action against tax havens. There is so much money lying there that if we were only to address the money that has remained untaxed for the past 20, 30 years and penalize that, bring even some of it back, the whole problem of public sector deficits, which has been the driving cause of austerity, particularly in the developed world, will instantly disappear. There is enough money in the public sector, there is enough money in the central banks, there is enough money in your pensions that we can all get together, the public and the private sector, invest in infrastructure, particularly in poor countries. In India, 300 million people still have no access to electricity. In repairing infrastructure in Europe, for example, in the United States, where the infrastructure in Germany and particularly in the US is terrible, worse than in many emerging markets. And in Africa, where we need to invest in industry. And the whole world will benefit and workers will benefit. And this, combined with the green transition, where a lot of new investment needs to be made in green energy, is the way forward. A global investment compact where you channel public sector money that is coming back from tax havens, where you channel money that is coming from financial transaction taxes, together with money that you as workers own that is in your pension funds, together with money controlled by public sector banks and sovereign wealth funds. And there is enough money sloshing around for everybody in the world to have a decent job. And if we don't do this, we are simultaneously going to get squeezed from both sides, because in the developed world, the workers are aging and retiring, and yet your pension funds are hardly generating any return. Exactly when you most need your pension money, that money is going to disappear because that money is lying in a tax haven with Apple. It's lying in the tax haven with Google. These are companies are not making investments. And at the same time, what we call the demographic dividend in the developing world, where there's a very young population coming online, is going to turn into a demographic curse as no jobs are found and governments lose control and young people, rightly concerned about their future, give up belief in their government. A global investment compact.
Thank you very much indeed, Sony. John, just a quick one for you. All the big international organisations now, every time I go to the IMF or World Bank, they talk the language of inequality. They're worried about inequality. You hear Christine Lagarde talking about it, you hear Jim Kim talking about it, you even hear Angel Gurria talking about it at the OECD. Do they really mean it, or do they see unions still as part of the problem? Are they engaging with Labour in a meaningful way, or are they just paying lip service to an idea they think is of the moment?
Larry, they're totally schizophrenic, and I would see that as a big improvement on where they were maybe 10 years ago, where we were being targeted as the market imperfections, which if we could only get back, if they could get back to a perfect liberal market system, then everything would be fine. As you say, work on Piketty, on the growth of the 1%. The argument that that can't go on indefinitely, the fact that that now is actually not just a political or a social problem, but also a serious economic problem, I think that is now at least understood by some of the people working in the international institutions, parts of the IMF, parts of the OECD, parts of the World Bank. The problem is, as most people in the room know from their own experience, that the policy has not changed. The analysis has changed, the concern has changed, inequality is seen as a problem, but the policy still is on autopilot for the sort of policies which create the inequality, which are still tolerating mass unemployment and austerity. So you see this complete gap between the analysis and the action on the ground.
Thank you very much, John. Let's take on the discussion a bit then. We've outlined what we think is the problem. Let's ask I'd like to all you four panelists to say what you think is the biggest impediment to progress. That's the next stage, I think. And then maybe we'll move on to what can be done, what two or three things we think could actually move things forward, and who the actors might be in that process. I want this to be a positive, forward-looking thing. So, who'd like to kick off? Has anybody like to kick off with what they think is the biggest impediment to the sort of progress that we want to see? Bernadette.
Oui, je pense qu'effectivement, il faut faire des propositions et nous en faisons. Et je pense que Sony m'a rendu la tâche facile parce que ce que nous disons, c'est qu'il faut, en tout cas en Europe, mais certainement dans le monde, il faut un plan d'investissement massif pour créer des emplois de qualité et des emplois qui redonnent à l'industrie sa place, mais une place qui soit soutenable de manière dans l'environnement. Et le problème que nous avons, c'est que lorsque nous parlons de ce plan d'investissement, qui est un plan qui est proposé par la CES de façon très claire, de façon très détaillée, lorsque nous présentons ce plan d'investissement, je n'ai encore rencontré aucun chef d'État ou de gouvernement qui me dise c'est une mauvaise idée. Ils disent tous c'est une très bonne idée, mais madame, nous n'avons pas l'argent. Or, je pense que s'il y avait une volonté politique pour créer, pour avoir un tel plan d'investissement, par la création d'un fonds qui mobiliserait les fonds qui sont disponibles et dont parlait Sony, par une autre utilisation de la Banque européenne d'investissement, on peut avoir tout un tas de formules. Je pense qu'un tel plan d'investissement redonnerait en Europe un espoir et la capacité de sortir de ce cul-de-sac qu'est le chômage et la situation de l'emploi à l'heure actuelle et de la précarité. Donc nous faisons ces propositions, nous les faisons très clairement et nous n'arrêterons pas de les faire parce que le mouvement syndical doit refuser et doit aussi proposer. Et cette proposition, c'est quelque chose que nous portons. Et je termine en disant que ce dont nous avons besoin aussi, c'est de changements dans la direction politique de l'Union européenne. Et c'est pour ça que nous sommes très impliqués dans la préparation des élections pour que les membres du Parlement européen, le président de la Commission européenne et au niveau national, politiquement, les idées que nous portons changent.
Thank you. JR, did you want to?
Yeah, I think there's one big problem that we all have, every country in the world, and that is this dramatic increase in corporate power. And until we actually regulate and control and limit corporate power, none of our good ideas are going to come to any fruition. Because basically it's not just finance. It is of course in finance, but it is in a whole range of the real economy as well, that governments are scared to do anything at any time because they say, oh well, if we start raising the tax rate, capital will move. If we put environmental controls, they're going to object. If we allow workers' rights, they will say, well, we will just move to the next country that doesn't allow workers' rights. This is a political problem. We have to generate in our own countries the political movement that will say it is possible to regulate corporate power and it's possible to do it in a way that actually benefits the economy, not just the people, but actually ensures stable and sustainable growth. So I think the big problem, the big constraint is our willingness to allow corporates such a deregulated environment and to give them the wrong incentives, to give them incentives for short-term profits instead of long-term gain, to give them incentives for speculative activity rather than productive activity, to give them incentives for avoiding employment generation. So I think that's the big problem we all face.
Can I just follow up, JRT, can I just follow up there? I mean, the G20 was seen as a forum for doing this after the crisis broke. That this was the idea: you bring together developed and developing countries, you actually organise on a global level and actually do some radical reforms. That's been disappointing, hasn't it? The G20 has failed as an institution?
Yeah, you know, to sound like a stuck record, the reason is the same. It's because our governments are not representing all the people. They're representing the large corporates in these governments. All the international negotiations, the government of India is going out there doing what large capital in India wants, as is the government of many, many other countries. So the problem is that G20 did not represent the interests of the people of those countries, whether the developed or the developing countries.
Sony, over to you. Who do you think is the biggest impediment to change here? Is it the international institutions? Is it corporate powers, JRT says? Is it the ECB? I mean, where do you see the problem lying here? I mean, what you're talking about seems eminently sensible. I'm sure to everybody in the hall that there's so much money around there. Why don't we use it for productive investment? It seems like a very, very sensible suggestion. Bernadette agrees with it. I'm sure JRT agrees with it. I'm sure John agrees with it. So, if sensible people realise it's a good idea, what's stopping it happening?
Well, I think Jayati referred to it partly, but also there is this perception that there is a first mover disadvantage, that if you were to be the government that started, for example, levying a tax on corporate savings that are not being invested, the corporate savings will move, the corporations will move. Now, this doesn't actually reflect reality, particularly if you are the European Union, particularly if you're the United States, particularly if you're India and China, and many of the countries in the G20 that are big enough, large enough, attractive enough for markets, attractive enough for capital, that no matter what they do, the money is not going to leave. And a starting point would be the self-belief that we don't have to be in a position where we are leaving the low-hanging fruit. Germany enjoys negative borrowing costs. Investors are throwing their money at the German government, take our money, and they are not even asking for any return. Yet, is the German government taking this money to make the investments that will actually generate a positive, not just a positive social and economic return, but a positive financial return? And the answer is no. And it is a complete colossal failure of common sense, and it's a colossal failure of political boldness. We need bold political leaders being pushed by voters, being pushed by unions, workers, to do sensible things. And I think this is where the biggest failure lies. Nobody wants to move first, yet many of these people actually can.
John?
I think the constraints are a mixture of ideology and also self-interest. And I think the strategy which we'll be discussing this week is how to tackle on both those fronts, through political action, but also on the question of ideology for winning the arguments. Now, as I said before, I think the argument on the real social, political, but also economic cost of rising inequality and the impossibility that the top 1% and the top 0.1% keep creaming off such a large part of growth, I think that argument is being won. The step from that is to point out where the facts are also on our side, that the organizations around the globe which reduce inequality are unions. Higher levels of unionization result in lower levels of inequality. Higher levels of collective bargaining coverage result in lower levels of inequality. Well-set minimum wages reduce inequality. Better employment protection reduce inequality. Now, those are not our figures. Those are the figures also of the international institutions, which are actually shown, but the policies still go in the wrong direction. So I think inequality, winning that key argument and showing now the fact that they can't go on recommending dismantling of collective bargaining systems is actually key.
Yeah, traditionally, people of the Conservative right and the Liberal centre have been reformers when they've realised that the system is coming under severe strain. Do you detect any sign of that happening? I mean, Bismarck was the first person to introduce pensions, for example. Lloyd George, the Liberal, and Keynes, they reformed capitalism in the 1910s and 1930s. Do you see any sign that people of the right are coming round to that way of thinking?
Well, I think I'd certainly bring back Bismarck compared to some of the neoliberals that we've got on the right today. But, I mean, seriously, I think one of the problems is that let's just call it the US model of deregulated capitalism, or an Anglo-American model, has dominated thinking for the last 30 years after the second oil shock, after the crisis. Now, what you see is in that model, the top 1% over 30 years have actually been creaming off nearly half of average income. So for the bottom 99%, instead of incomes growing by 1% a year in the US, they've been growing by a little over 0.5%, almost 0.6%, which is worse than a lot of fairer European countries, including France, Nordics, and elsewhere. Now, the problem is that means there's a very strong vested interest that 1% is actually also the 1% that finances the political parties, that finances both political parties in the United States, which dominates the media, which dominates the political interest. So we have to break into that question of self-interest.
How do we do that, though? How do we break in?
Two sets of issues. One, winning the argument about the role of unions. You can see where there are strong unionization, there is greater checks on balances on the 1%, but there's also better ways of raising income, connecting it to productivity. Two other things, and these reflect to the things which Jayati and Sonny have been talking about. Some of the successes are not any longer just in the traditional north. The success of Brazil in reducing, under Lula, the Gini coefficient by 6 whole percentage points in 10 years shows that political will, raising minimum wages, can work. And we've got a battle on our hands now on tax. On Sonny's point, we're having, in the Pace Erosion Profit Shifting Initiative at the OECD, you'll find the room full of 100 corporate tax lawyers. We have to take on those arguments in their current form. And I just say, on Sonny's point about harnessing our own workers' capital money, tomorrow afternoon we're going to have a whole session of that in the sub-plenary on jobs. And it's precisely how do we move the argument to patient capital, long-term investment, making sure that we're putting our money where our mouth is on policy advocacy.
Sonny, I think you wanted to come in there.
Just very quickly, I did want to emphasize this point about your own money, because while we are criticizing politicians, while we are criticizing political parties, the behavior of pension funds, including those with union trustees on board, has been equally bad as the rest of the financial market. And I think this is a great logical starting point. And this is a particularly good point where actually financial markets and financial capital, not just the one that you own, can actually be your friend. We criticize credit rating agencies, we criticize speculators a lot, but for the past 3 years in Europe, the credit rating agencies, the speculators, the financial markets have been telling the European Union to invest, have been telling the European Union not to have austerity, and yet our politicians have been ignoring that message. The Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, which is the largest in the world today, has $350 billion in fixed income assets that generated an annual return of minus 0.1% last year. Capital around the world, including yours, is desperate to generate returns. Because if the IMF is even half right, over the next 5 years, the returns are going to be so bad that it's not just the workers who are going to be unhappy, it's going to be the capital. Investment is what works for workers, investment is what also works for capital, and investment is also what generates tax revenues for governments.
Thank you very much, Sonny. Jayati.
Yeah, just very quickly, you know, it strikes me there are so many good ideas in this panel, in this room. Why is it that we're not able to get this message across in our countries and our societies? I think a big role is played by the media. And we all know it's heavily corporatized, it's very monopolized, etc. But we can't just keep crying about it. Maybe it's time we do something about it. So among the things I would say, and I must say I'm inspired by the sight of this wonderful group of many, and not just the power of many, not one. Why don't we actually develop alternative media? Why don't we put some of our funds into getting this message across everywhere in a way that is reaching people who are not then constantly persuaded by what is clear misinformation that benefits only large capital? So I really think we have to focus as trade unions, as progressive movements, as citizens concerned about democracy. We have to focus on being able to influence the media, if necessary by creating our own and making sure that it's popular.
Okay. We are coming towards the end of our time. I'm going to ask my panelists to say the one thing they would like to see done in the next 12 months to actually start this process. I want to end this thing on a positive note. Have a think about what do you think would be the one thing that would actually change things for the better? Bernadette.
As far as I'm concerned, I'm speaking, of course, for the European Union. I think the strength of trade union in Europe is their unity, and it's their capacity to take part and change, modify the economic governance that is currently being put in place. And that's, I think, what we should be doing or improving in Europe, and I think that is not only beneficial for Europeans. I really believe that if we manage to turn the tide in Europe, it's beneficial for workers elsewhere.
Thank you very much indeed. Jay Arty.
I think it would have to be, if you're giving me only a year, I think it would have to
you can extend it a bit.
Generating a broad popular movement in every country on the basis of progressive media, on the basis of progressive movements and action and solidarity, to curb corporate power, to increase the activities of an accountable state to deliver basic goods and citizens' rights.
Sony.
You should start tomorrow with the meeting of the pension fund trustees that are part of the labor movement, and agree to have a coordinated strategy to make those funds invest in infrastructure, invest and send money to SMEs, not put money in the S&P 500 index, where corporations no longer actually need that money and use that money to make any investments. And that, combined with continuing pressure on tax havens and pushing forward the OECD's work aggressively, are the two most promising ways forward.
Thank you very much. John, finally.
So, all of the previous suggestions.
That's taken as read.
All of the previous suggestions, which I think
all good ones,
are actually excellent. Plus, as Sonny had two, I'd add two.
Yeah, okay, go on.
One, change the narrative around austerity in a lot of part of the world to one of growth and job creation. Get confidence back into working families. Secondly, in the 12 months, and this is doable, shift the recommendations of the international institutions and many governments from attacking collective bargaining and unions to actually saying we are the solution in many, many cases around the world.
Okay, thank you very much. I must apologise. I was hoping to open this session up to a Q&A, but it's been such a brief one and so rich from the panellists that I haven't been able to do so. But if you've enjoyed this session, there's a sub-plenary this afternoon on sustainable jobs, which will be taking place in sub-plenary room 2. Can I just say, to sum up, I've got about 30 seconds to do so because time is very tight. What I think we've got out of this a number of points. One, the current system is under severe strain and the model appears to be broken. Two, it's not delivering for the bulk of the population, it's delivering for a few, but not the many. Three, it can be changed. Four, get your pension funds organised and start to do it. And five, make a fuss about it. Get organised. Thank you very much indeed.
Wir bedanken uns herzlich bei den Podiumsteilnehmern für ihre interessanten Ausführungen. Wir bedanken uns bei Larry Elliott für seine professionelle Art, diesen Kreis zu moderieren. bei John, bei Bernadette, bei Yayati und Sony für Ihre Anregungen. Herzlichen Dank nochmal. Thank you very much. So, und im Übrigen hat mir am besten gefallen der Vorschlag, eine breite Volksbewegung zu schaffen. Ich glaube nur, es wird länger als 12 Monate dauern. Das ist einem wohl offensichtlich ein Problem, wenn ich das mal so sagen darf. So, Kolleginnen und Kollegen, wir nähern uns so langsam dem Ende des Vormittages. Ich möchte jetzt gerne noch einmal das Wort geben an Phil Jennings. Phil Jennings koordiniert in diesem Jahr den Rat der Global Unions. Er ist ein enger Partner von uns und er wird jetzt zu diesem Kongress sprechen. Phil, du hast das Wort.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, everybody, for this very warm reception, and for the 3 people that clapped in the top left corner. Thank you very much. Michael, you introduced me as an elder, I think, and I just have to say, being an elder, I'm hard of hearing, and when you tell me to shut up, I will not be listening. I want to congratulate Sharon for her speech, for setting out the challenges in front of us, and for setting a framework for action. Thank you, Sharon, for your vision and for the energy that you brought to this job. It is not lost on any of us in this room that at the world level and in Europe, we have 2 women leading the fight in some of the most difficult circumstances that have faced the trade union movement ever. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Bernadette. That doesn't even qualify for polite applause. For God's sake, put your hands together for Sharon and Bernadette. It's better. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And I want to thank the DGB for all their help. Thank you, Michael. And thank you for the concert last night. For those of you that were there, I'm sure, like me, you were moved by the sign of that single white rose standing on the conductor's rostrum. For those of you that weren't there, there was an orchestra, a full house, the orchestra played, and there was a single white rose in memory of Claude Abado, who had been the conductor of the Berlin Philharmonic. I'm sure you agree with me. It was moving, it was simple, it was majestic. Lost in the music, my mind wandered. Who is trying to lay the white rose of farewell on this movement? Lost in the music, I was beginning to think, who are those people that are saying goodbye to us? Labour, rest in peace. It's always good to know the enemy in front of you, and my mind began to wonder, who are these people that want to send us the white rose? It's Walmart, T-Mobile, Amazon, Citibank, the US Chamber of Commerce, Qatar Airways, to my friends in Ireland, Ryanair, the US Chamber of Commerce, the Colombian government and the Korean government. They are the people trying to raise and place a white rose on our movement. We have to have a response. There's a strong gravitational pull in this room that is keeping you in your seats. So we must have a strong, noisy message. You get on your feet now and make noise and clap that we are going to beat Walmart, that we're going to beat Amazon. On your feet, for God's sake, on your feet. Noise. That we won't take it. That we're fighting back. Up, stand, noise. There's people sitting down. Up. We are fighting back. We have answers. We are union. We are family. We are in 100, 200 nations. Good. I am pleased to say that the danger of anybody now having deep vein thrombosis is now over. And we can send a message to Walmart and all the others that you can cancel your White Rose order to enter Flora. It's a joke. Thank you. So, the great thing about this Congress and its theme, in a place sometimes where we've not had our pulse coursing with the speeches and the dynamism, the message we send to all of those people out there is a message they don't want to hear, because we are putting power back into the equation. And the last thing that these people want to hear is that we are about building workers' power. We are not accepting defeat. We are not accepting business as usual. We are building power. Also, take confidence in what we say and stand for. We don't go to the G20 and the IMF and the World Bank with a series of excuses. We go there with energy, with ideas, imagination and solutions of action. This is a place of energy, ideas and action. And we should be proud of the positions and the policies that we have developed. Let this Berlin Congress be not the White Rose Congress, but the Red Rose Congress of blood, of life, of passion, of fighting back with the aim to win. In Africa, they have a wonderful saying, backward never, forward ever. Backward never, forward ever. Positive, on the front foot, that there's nothing tired about us, that we aim to win. Martin Luther King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. Our goal, our work, our mission is to build our power to bend that arc of history back to justice. It can be done. This year, let's hear it for the people of South Africa, who only this year celebrated their 20th anniversary of freedom and democracy. Let's hear it for all those that struggle against apartheid. In this city, the arc of justice bent and changed the destiny of a continent when the Berlin Wall fell. And now the people of North Africa, our future Nobel Peace Prize winners, the Tunisian labor movement, bent the arc of justice in their direction once again. And I say to you, amidst all of this clamor, darkness, we shouldn't just curse the darkness. This is a time for us. We must take it. The world is being cooked, corrupted, shaped into the direction in the pursuit of happiness, not of all, but of the 1%. We've seen a failure to the planet, a failure to our economy, a failure in our community to workers. It has brought cash and catastrophe. If any politician of any persuasion stands up and starts talking about market rules, okay, he doesn't deserve anybody's endorsement or support. The evidence is mounting. The evidence is clear. The facts are on the table. Inequality is bad. It's toxic. Inequality proven. The OECD, for God's sake, started a small project on inequality, and it's now taken over the whole House. Even the Secretary General, under the persuasion of John Evans at the OECD, says this is now mainstream. We got a problem. The status quo ain't working. The International Monetary Fund said the same thing. Even the World Economic Forum said this year that the single greatest risk facing the planet was income disparity. Thomas Piketty arrives with his modern Das Kapital, and he basically tells us we got it wrong. We thought inequality was bad compared to the 1940s or even the 1920s. He now claims that inequality is as bad now as it was in the 1700s. And if we don't do something about it, the situation is going to get worse. We have a chance. People are looking for answers. The citizens are looking for answers. Think tanks looking for answers. Our friends on the left are looking for answers. And we have the answers here in this House, and I don't say that in an arrogant way. I say it because of the proof that I've seen in the work that has gone into the preparation and the seeking of new solutions, globally, regionally, and nationally. You don't need to run to Silicon Valley for a solution here. We are in the solutions business, and nobody should be ashamed to say in this room as a union leader, we know how to fix income distribution. We know how to deal with income inequality. And that's what I say. We have, yeah, come on, we can deal with it. We can deal with it. And that's why I say, and I'm trying, is it time to finish? I'm not quite there. Workers of this world need a pay rise. I've been saying it everywhere. If we're going to change the shape of income in this world, we have to have a pay rise for the workers of this world. Are you with me? Are you with me? Now, my hearing is sound enough. Michael Sommer, when he's angry, is a ferocious character. So I'd like to conclude my remarks with the following. I was very happy to work with the ICTU in Ireland on a project on the future of their own labour movement. And every day, going to the office, meeting with the unions, I passed a statue in the centre of O'Connell Street in Dublin with the famous union leader, James Larkin. And if you look at the plinth, what is written, it says the following. The great appear great because we are on our knees. The great appear great because we are on our knees. And he says, let us rise. So for one more final time, to accomplish the contract with Michael and Sharon, to get some feeling and emotion in this room, I ask you all to rise once again. Let us rise to grow our unions. If you want to grow your unions, then rise. If you want the workers of this world to have a pay rise, then rise. If you want to close those tax havens, rise. If you want equal justice for women and young people, rise. If you stand for workers' justice, you rise. If you are committing your power to grow our economies for our people, then rise. Thank you.
So, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, der Phil hat gerade den Kongress gerockt, das war doch richtig schön. Er hat einen irischen Gewerkschaftsführer zitiert. Ich möchte einen deutschen Gewerkschaftsführer zitieren, der hat einmal gesagt, Willy Bleicher hieß er, du sollst dich niemals vor einem lebenden Menschen bücken. Denn wir sind eine stolze Bewegung, wir sind eine starke Bewegung, wir sind eine Bewegung der Würde. Und als eine solche treten wir hier in Berlin auf und auch wenn wir draußen in der Welt kämpfen, Kolleginnen und Kollegen. Das ist unser Auftrag. Ich möchte die Gelegenheit nutzen, mich erstmal bei den Kolleginnen und Kollegen zu bedanken, ohne die wir hier nicht tagen könnten. Das sind nämlich unsere Dolmetscherinnen und Dolmetscher. Die machen einen wunderbaren Job, die machen eine ganz harte Arbeit und dafür bedanken wir uns sehr. Die haben übrigens auch anständige Arbeitsbedingungen verdient, deswegen machen wir jetzt auch gleich eine Pause. Aber vor der Pause hat nochmal Sharon Worre das Wort. Sharon.
Two very quick announcements, brothers and sisters. One, let's have the young people stand up so we can welcome them here. Come on, all the young people, anyone under 35 or who thinks they're under 35, stand up. And for all you young people outside the City Cube, we're actually going to have a wall of defence for Qatar at 1 o'clock, so be there and enjoy this afternoon. Thank you, Michael.
Danke, Sharon. Ich habe jetzt nur noch zwei technische Ansagen zu machen. Das eine ist, das volle Plenum tagt wieder am Mittwochmorgen um 9 Uhr. Ab heute Mittag tagen ab 14 Uhr die Subplenaries. Und ich bitte euch sehr, an diesen Subplenaries teilzunehmen und diese neue Form des Kongresses auch zu einem Erfolg zu machen. Das Zweite ist, ich will noch mal daran erinnern, dass Abänderungsanträge zur Kongressentschließung bis 15 Uhr abgegeben sein müssen. Und dann werden sie nicht mehr berücksichtigt. Sie können entweder direkt über Online abgegeben werden oder da vorne an dem Tisch, da sitzt eine Kollegin von uns, die diese Abänderungsanträge entgegennimmt. Hast du noch irgendwas, Tim? Du läufst so nervös durch die Gegend? Dann sag mal noch. Tim Noonan, he is our chief organizer, hat noch einiges zu sagen. Tim, do it directly. It's better to say it to us. Here, take this.
Colleagues, there are a number of caucus meetings to take place this lunchtime. ITUC Africa, 12:30 in room New York 1. ITUC Asia Pacific, 12:30 in room Helsinki 1. There are side events also scheduled from the FNV, New and Democratic Methods of Trade Unionism, Trade Union Congress of Great Britain, EI and PSI on LGBTI members, the FNV 12:30 in New York 3, the TUC, PSI and EI 12:30 in Helsinki 2. Young delegates will have their first gathering at 12:30 in New York 2. The FES will have a meeting this afternoon confronting the energy crisis, 5:30 p.m. New York 2. A word on catering, colleagues. The food can be had downstairs where the wonderful DGB reception was last night. Please take your time. You have 90 minutes to eat to avoid the queues. Boot camps this evening, 6 p.m., all of them. One on organising, New York 1. One on social media, Helsinki 2. One on climate action, Helsinki 1. And there will be a showing of the film the FNV film Working Class Heroes at 6 p.m. in New York 3. Colleagues, we'd like to remind you to sign up for Congress Live. We're kicking off with the Americas this afternoon. Please go and sign up at the desk there for your regional timing. One last announcement. Tomorrow, be prepared for T-Mobile action. Buses departing here, 5 p.m. And finally, again, amendments, 3 p.m. by electronic mail or submitting over in writing at the desk on my right. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Für alle, die um 12:30 Uhr irgendwo sein wollen, will ich euch sagen, ihr kommt auf jeden Fall zu spät, weil es ist schon 12:35 Uhr. Das ist das eine. Das zweite ist, für alle, die sich jetzt die diversen Seitenaktivitäten nicht merken konnten, ich bin mir sicher, ihr findet sie auf unserer Website bzw. auf unserer App. Und ich wünsche euch jetzt ein gutes Mittagessen. Heute Nachmittag sind die Subplenaries, morgen sind die Subplenaries und wir sehen uns wieder am Mittwoch um 9 hier im Plenum. Herzlichen Dank.